Good morning. Thank you all for attending this meeting of the Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee. Hello to those of you at home, including Graham, get well soon, but also hello to everybody else watching at home. This meeting today is open to the public. However, Appendix 3 of the report at item 9 on the Amey performance review is not available because it contains exempt information. If members wish to discuss information in that appendix, we will need to ask the public and press to kindly leave that part of the meeting, and we will pause the webcast. The meeting will be webcast. The recording will be available for people to view later through the Council's website. It is also possible that Sheffield Live TV will record and rebroadcast this meeting. It's going to be very exciting, because if they know what's good for them, they will do that. We have received one petition and 26 public questions from 13 members of the public. Can I request mobile phones and other such equipment are switched to silent mode? There is no fire test for today. If there is an evacuation, please take instructions from Town Hall staff. The assembly point is Tudor Square. I'm going to go to introductions next, starting, shall we go down that side of the room next?
Councillor Alexi Diamond, Green Party spokesperson on Waste and Street Scene Committee and Councillor for Glyphosate Valley.
Hello, I'm Christine Gilligan-Cooper and I'm Councillor for Hillsborough.
Councillor Sue Alston, I'm Councillor for Fulwood.
Councillor Tim Huggan, I'm Councillor for Crooks and Crossbow.
David Wayne, Interim Service Manager, Highways Maintenance Division.
And Davin Lowe, Interim Service Manager, Highways Maintenance Division.
Councillor Charlotte Meyer-Richards, Councillor for
Mark Jones, Deputy Chair and Councillor for Burnaby Ward.
Thanks. Since we're doing officers as well already, let's carry on in that vein.
Sarah Bennett, Assistant Director, Legal Services.
Richard Eyre, Director of Street Scene and Regulations.
Rachel Appleyard from Democratic Services.
Thank you. And if I didn't say earlier, Councillor Joe Otten, Chair of the committee. We have apologies from Councillor Diane Hurst with Councillor Tony Downing attending as substitute. Are there any more apologies? No, okay, I don't think so. Okay. Item 2, exclusion of press and public. As I explained earlier, we do have one exempt appendix in item 9. We will close the meeting if members wish to discuss information in that appendix when the time comes. I would ask members take care not to mention items in that appendix in the public section of the meeting. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay. Minutes. Sorry. Yeah, Shani.
Sorry, I don't, because I was out getting my cup of water, I may have missed. We know this is going to be quite a long meeting. Are you going to suggest that after, I don't know, 4 hours we have a break? Or maybe even 2.5 hours, Joe?
I think that's probably a good suggestion, probably after 2 hours. Given we're limited 3.5 hours altogether, there is also another meeting in this room at 2 o'clock, so we cannot
speak very quickly.
Even if we should not take a very long break, no. Because we cannot run into the next meeting and they need time to set up. So it would probably be 5 or 10 minutes. Yes, happy to do that. Declarations of interest? None. Okay. Public questions and petitions. So in my pack I've got questions starting with Andy Buck. Is there a petition? Where's the petition?
That's the full one.
Oh right, that's right, okay. So yes, sorry, a petition from Mohammed Faisal Anzar, who's not attending, so he will get a written response to that petition. Oh, sorry, minutes last meeting. No, you're quite right. Sorry, stepping back for a moment. Minutes of the previous meeting on pages 11 to 18. Are there any corrections for those minutes, or can we agree them as a correct record? I don't propose to go through them page by page because everybody's read them already, and you can't read it 1 page a second anyway, can you?
Just being a bit previous here. I know that when the minutes were originally circulated for us to just see them in draft, I did raise that it hadn't mentioned the fact that we were going to send out a questionnaire to all members about their experience of Amey in their wards. And I assumed it had been amended, but I haven't checked because I have been looking at other things. So can I just ask that it has been included in the minutes?
Thanks, Chair. I can remember there was some questions raised about what was included in the decisions, and we added some extra text into the work programme item for that meeting. I can't see that the questionnaire that would be sent to members was added into the minutes. Oh no. Yeah, no, it was, sorry, 7.5, the minutes. Yeah, the views of all members be sought prior to the meeting to give members a full picture of the experiences across the wards. So that was incorporated. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I just say that was sent to members, and I've circulated the results to members of the committee to help them in their consideration of that item. Okay, so can we agree those minutes as a correct record? I'll take silence as assent. Thank you. Okay, public questions. So as I said, there's a petition from Mohammed Faisal Ansar relating to street cleaning, which will get a written response as he's not here. So the first question, first question in my pack is from Andy Buck. Is Andy Buck here? Right. Would you like to come and ask a question, please? Please sit in the chair, and if you can press the button to turn the microphone on.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much for this opportunity. My name's Andy Buck. I'm a resident of Chipping House Road in Sharrow. I've got three questions. Firstly, will the council hold further discussions with Amey with a view to expediting the preparation and then implementation of plans to resurface Chipping House Road and neighbouring streets? Guarantee that at the very latest these streets will be resurfaced by March 2025, and confirm that the necessary work on each street will be undertaken in a single period rather than split over 2 or more periods. My second question is, will the council guarantee that Amey will repair all the sections of Chipping House Road that were marked up for repair on the 15th of September 2023 before the yellow markings fade and disappear? And thirdly, what is the council doing to improve the handling of complaints about streets ahead? Will the council ensure that my complaint to the 24th of March 2023 is responded to? Thanks very much.
Thank you. So, in answer to your questions, and some of this, obviously, we have a session later in the agenda discussing some of these issues in more detail, so you may be interested in that. In response to the first question about the plans to resurface Chipping House Road, discussions are ongoing, and Amey are also committed to discussing the adjacent streets to achieve a joined-up solution to these areas that have waited a significant amount of time for resurfacing. The target date is March 2025, and Amey are committed to using all reasonable efforts to undertake the work by then. Amey have confirmed that they will target their programmes to maximise programme efficiency. Any mitigations related to the trees will tend to be delivered prior to resurfacing, and there will be a natural short break between the differing work streams. Amey have confirmed they will repair all sections marked up for repair, and on the issue of the handling of complaints, Amey are preparing an action plan to deal with long timescales associated with customer inquiries. With regard to the complaint of 24th of March 2023, many of the points have been addressed in the Streets Ahead response dated 7th of August. With regard to the ongoing remaining issues, these will be responded to by October 2023. However, the pending issue will have to be addressed as a result of the delivery of the surfacing programme when implemented. Obviously, these are answers that we've largely been provided by Amey coming through council offices. We are discussing the issues around, particularly around handling of complaints and processing of, and other issues later in the meeting. Thank you, Mr. Buck. I've been advised that I've jumped ahead to the second pack of questions, so we've taken them a little bit out of order. So the next...
Councillor Otten.
Yes.
Sorry, looking at these answers, I mean, the answer to confirm that the necessary work on each street will be done, actually the answer is no, despite the fact that those very large number of words have been put there. And on question 2, saying, yeah, they'll repair them, but there's no time scale. So are they going to repair them next week, or the day after my funeral?
Shauna, this is a question.
Earliest?
This is a question for the session on Amey, isn't it?
I think
you're quite right to observe.
Note our disappointment.
You're quite right to observe. No, I completely agree. It's correct to observe that the request was for a guarantee, and the answer doesn't actually sound like a guarantee, does it? So, if I can move on to a question from Greg Hewitt from Sheffield Action on Plastic. If you come to the table, please.
Hi, my name is Greg Hewitt. I'm the chair of Sheffield Action on Plastic. Basically, plastic waste is one of the greatest environmental challenges facing the world today. The UK government estimates there's currently more than 150 million tonnes of plastic in the world's oceans, and that some 100,000 sea mammals and 1 million seabirds die from eating or become entangled in plastic waste each year. Sheffield Action on Plastic has been set up to kind of work with the Sheffield community to reduce single-use plastic, and we would like Sheffield City Council to commit to taking leadership on tackling the plastic waste problem by taking responsibility for its own impact on the environment and society, both within the local area and across the globe. We would like the council to work with to minimise the use of single-use plastics across its own operations and services, and by all staff, to proactively work with partners to find positive solutions for reducing unnecessary single-use plastic waste across the city. So back in May, I contacted the Sheffield City Councillor, and the councillor informed me that a plastic-free resolution is something that all councils should support, and this councillor told me that they were keen to help Sheffield achieve the plastic-free community status by Surface Against Sewage, and to develop a plastic-free action plan. And the resolution that is on the table really is for Sheffield City Council to lead by example and remove single-use plastic items from its premises and operations, to encourage plastic-free initiatives, support the Sheffield Action on Plastic group and support events, and name a representative on the council to sit on the core group of Sheffield Action on Plastic. A number of actions that the council can include are reducing single-use plastics across offices, supporting schools to reduce single-use plastics, communicate it through communication channels, support with work with event organisers to eliminate single-use plastics across events held on council land, basically use government legislation to support our efforts, require suppliers to minimise the use of single-use plastics in their service provision and find sustainable alternatives. So would the Waste and Street Scene Committee commit to supporting this resolution and add this as part of its work plan?
Thank you for your question. Obviously, you've expanded somewhat on the question that was written, but I'll give you the answer we have. The Council does not currently have a specific policy on single-use plastics. However, we will be developing a new waste strategy which will set out how Sheffield's waste will be managed over the coming years. Whilst the scope and detail of this strategy will need to be agreed through the committee system, it is expected that new waste strategy will include consideration of council waste as well as household waste, and potential measures to increase sustainability through waste reduction and recycling. The development of the waste strategy will begin once government has provided its long-awaited confirmation of a number of key waste policies. This will ensure that Sheffield's future strategy meets legislative requirements. A climate impact assessment tool was introduced in 2022 to identify the potential climate impacts of council projects, policies and programmes, and includes, among other things, consideration of resource use of products and waste. The use of this tool will help to highlight opportunities to reduce or eliminate single-use plastics. Where opportunities to do this are identified, this can be carried through service delivery or as a contract requirement in procurement. This year, we established a working group to provide advice and support to businesses on the requirements of the single-use plastics ban. This new legislation requires that from the 1st of October 2023, businesses must no longer supply, sell or offer certain single-use plastic items, including plastic cutlery, plates and polystyrene coffee cups. You may have heard me talk on Radio Sheffield on Monday morning on this issue, on the support we're offering to businesses to help them do that. Messages to encourage the reduction and recycling of plastic items are included in our waste and recycling communications, and we will welcome a conversation with Sheffield Action on Plastic Group to explore the potential to include details of events and initiatives in future communications. Now that's a little bit dry, isn't it? But I understand we have an agreement for me to come to one of your meetings in October, so we can discuss all this in a little more detail, and I hope that's acceptable as a first step towards some of the things you're asking for. Thank you.
Councillor Otton. Sorry, on the second paragraph where it says we're waiting for the government confirmation of a number of key waste policies, is there a time scale for that?
We've been waiting for this imminently for the last few years, as is my understanding. However, this is a public question session. I think I appreciate you're making perfectly useful and valid points. I think we should stick to the public section of the meeting, unless you have something utterly vital. We have been waiting for some time, and we've been expecting it imminently for some time. Mark, do you really need to come in?
I was going to suggest that though licensing and other elements may sit within our committee and also disposal of waste is within our committee, I think resources need to be engaged because it's a wider council element. Obviously, we've done steps to get rid of single-use plastics within some of the estate, replacing plastic cups and such like. But I think there's also needs to maybe not just sit solely on your shoulders, but the burden of this one should be shared across maybe other committees. Quite right. Okay, but no. This is ridiculous.
We have passed a motion on the circular economy years ago on this. It was much gutted by other parties, and we need to move forward on this. Okay,
can we stop the clock on public question on the public questions element while members discuss this? Alexi.
Thank you very much. I think there's, I've got to disagree with Mark a little bit because we've got other things in our committee that we do have powers over, and I don't think we need to wait for the government on things like the markets that we operate and the food markets, which we've been developing the policy on, so we can encourage and put some
point of accuracy,
yeah.
Alexi. I said that we should take this, but it sits with other committees as well. So I'm not saying that we don't deal with this.
Okay. I'm going to stop this now.
You don't need to wait for.
We have a work programme discussion next on the agenda. If people want to suggest items to add to that work programme, please do so then. The next questioner is Graham Marsden from Greener Grinnell. Or Jeff Cox attending on behalf of Graham Marsden. Yes. Do you want to come and ask a question, please?
Yeah, my name's Jeff Cox. I'm speaking on behalf of Greener Greenhill, which is a community-based climate and nature group. The question, and indeed the article we wrote in the Sheffield Telegraph last month, outlines the steps we have taken as a local group to make a start on creating the circular economy work in practice, specifically dealing with hard-to-recycle individual plastic products like blister packs or dental products, for example, which can't go into the general mix. And it also describes the difficulties we've encountered along the way. So, cutting to the chase for your time, pressures, the question contains an ask and an offer. The ask is that the council sets up a citywide inclusive working group to map out what is needed to make the circular economy work in relation to these specialist recycling products and to commission pilots to progress that. And the offer is that we are happy to help in that process, both with ideas, with finding community groups who are prepared to trial it in practice besides just ourselves. So that's the ask and the offer. Thank you.
Thank you. We acknowledge and appreciate the input of community groups in providing local solutions for some recycling schemes. It is important that when providing recycling collections across the whole city, we ensure that there are reliable and secure recycling outlets available for these materials we collect. Our existing services, which provide collections of paper, cardboard, glass, cans, plastic bottles, have long established recycling markets, which means that the materials we collect for recycling are then sent for recycling. There are a number of other materials that could theoretically be collected through our recycling services, but many have limited or unreliable outlets or have long-distance disposal options, which means that we have to carefully consider the environmental and financial viability of collecting some materials. I will extemporise a little, if I may. I mean, I am actually quite concerned that it is really important that the materials we collect are recycled and that people have confidence that they're going to be recycled. And I know there are stories around about plastics ending up in the oceans. And therefore, I'm also concerned about anything that involves exporting plastic waste, because that is always going to be a risk. And so I would rather, frankly, put a soft plastic in the incinerator than export it for recycling, because at least you know it's not going in the oceans that way. And maybe I'm wrong, and I'll probably have that discussion with Sheffield Action on Plastic. But sorry, that's going back to the written answer. With numerous upcoming changes expected through the Environment Act, we do expect to be taking more recyclable materials in the next few years, including plastic pots, tubs and trays, and potentially cartons and soft plastics. The exact detail and timing for these new requirements has been long awaited from government, and once confirmed, this will inform the development of a new waste strategy that will set out how Sheffield will manage its waste and recycling over the coming years. Government is also expected to provide clarity on what funding will be available to local authorities to help pay for these new requirements, and as we continue through periods of restricted funding and pressured budgets. The Environment Act will have a major impact on the waste industry, not just in terms of new recycling collections, but because product manufacturers will be required to pay fees on the products they place onto the market based on how recyclable their products are. This is important because they will be incentivised to reduce packaging, and where packaging is needed, the fees will make sure it is reused or recyclable. This should mean that manufacturers using hard-to-recycle materials for their packaging will move to using materials that are recyclable, and this will help to provide more secure and sustainable recycling markets in future. Thank you for your question. The next question is from Simon Geller. Is Simon Geller here? No, okay, so that will get a written answer. Jeff Palmer. Jeff Palmer, you want to come to the microphone, please?
Good morning, my name's Jeff Palmer. I live in Hackenthorpe.
Sorry, can you hang on a second, please? Sorry.
Yes.
Right, okay. No, I'm happy with that. Okay. Sorry, sorry, excuse the interruption. The Councillor Gary Wetherell's absence at short notice has authority, short notice authority for a substitution to be made, and so that's why Councillor Mike Chaplin is here. So we're happy for that to happen. So if you're happy to take your seat, obviously that had to, this has been done at very short notice, so it wasn't able to be announced at the normal time, and that's why obviously there weren't apologies for Councillor Wetherell. Thank you. Okay, sorry about that interruption. You want to go ahead with the question, please?
Okay, good morning. My name's Jeff Palmer. I live in Hackenthorpe. The issue is ongoing roadworks that Amey are refusing to do on the Sheffield-Bayton Road. Now, this has been an ongoing issue. We're fighting a losing battle with Amey. A, because they promise to do the work and don't. Secondly, they refuse to answer the phone and speak to members of the public to deal with the issues. And thirdly, also the local MP is on this case. Now, what I would first like to know is who on the Sheffield Council actually supervises and monitors the work that Amey's are supposed to do, and who follows it up to make sure that the work has been done. Now, this has been going on now on Sheffield-Bayton Road for over 12 months, and still we've got yellow lines around potholes in the road. So we need to know why Amey's haven't been brought to to this meeting to face the committee and answer the questions. That's about the issue, actually. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I just say, we have been asked to this meeting too, and we have an item later on the agenda where,
I've seen that.
Where precisely for some of the reasons you raised and others, we are holding them to account for some of the performance issues that you raise. But let me give you the written answer. The Streets Ahead highway maintenance contract is based on the principle of self-monitoring. The Sheffield City Council carries out sample checks to validate the Amey self-monitoring regime, and any areas of non-compliance are dealt with accordingly. Sheffield City Council robustly challenge Amey where poor working practices are identified and outcomes include financial and technical sanctions. The overall road condition in Sheffield continues to benchmark well against national figures. Each carriageway and footway is assessed on a 2-year cycle. Carriageways and footways that fail to meet the required standards are rectified in the following year cycle. As part of Streets Ahead, there is a team of highway safety inspectors who conduct inspections of each area of Sheffield. The frequency of inspections depends on the hierarchy of the road, with principal roads being routinely inspected on a monthly basis and local estate roads routinely inspected on an annual basis. Should there be any potholes that require attention, then they will be noted on these inspections and repaired accordingly. Any road or footway that is deemed dangerous or unsafe as part of a risk-based inspection will be addressed. We also encourage members of the public to report any issues which give cause for concern. Repairs to hazardous potholes have shown good performance throughout the year. These are potholes which are greater than 40 millimetres in depth. It is notable during Q4 of 2022-23, which is the winter seasonal peak, Amey achieved 98.7% quarter average. However, we know performance around lower category defects, potholes less than 40 millimetres deep in carriageways, isn't as good as it should be, and further detail is set out in the closed Appendix 3 of the Amey Performance Report, Waste and Street Scene Policy Committee, that's this meeting, for councillors to debate. Yes, so that's not really a very satisfactory answer because it refers to a document which is a closed document, but unfortunately for contractual reasons, some of the detail around the performance on those lower category potholes is sensitive and there has to be closed. But please be assured that the reason we're having this session later in the meeting is because of the issues you raise in your neighbourhood and across the city.
Can I just ask one more thing? I have actually here 5 or 6 letters from Amey quite clearly stating they're refusing to do work. I would like you to read them if that is possible.
If you want to share them with me, I'm happy to take them away.
And hand them over to you to peruse in your own time.
Please do hand them over, yes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the next question is, so the second pack is included in the first pack by the look of it. So Andy Buck is not attending.
We've done that one.
We've done that one. Oh, right, that's what I've done that one. Chloe Cheeseman is not attending. We'll get a written answer. So we come to the Extinction Rebellion questions. So we have Izzy first. Yeah, I mean, is it worth? You've got Izzy and Rob. Izzy and Rob. Do you want both come to the desk at the same time so we can?
Heather and Jane as well, so there's 4 in total from.
We don't have enough chairs. Yes, yeah. If we could make room for all the XR people that want to ask questions in this section, if we could, rather than one at a time, swapping. Okay. Izzy.
Sorry, can you put the mic on, please?
There's a button in front of you to press to get the mic. That's it. Yeah.
Good morning, everybody, on behalf of Extinction Rebellion Sheffield. Thank you, that's nice. My first question of 2. This motion is weak because it has no timeline. Please amend the motion to set a date by which glyphosate will no longer be sprayed on our streets and pavements. 2025 would seem reasonable.
Thank you. The committee report opens with a clear recommendation that officers are to return to the committee as soon as central government guidance and legislation on the use of pesticides in the public realm has been published, with an update promised before the end of 2025. At this time, the Council's financial situation, the indicative £150 million cost of a complete cessation of glyphosate to the authority, and the lack of licensing for alternative products for use on hard surfaces mean that this is realistically out of the Council's control and is a matter for central government and regulatory bodies to drive forward. As soon as we get specific guidance, we'll be coming back to the committee for a decision on the best way forward. And I would add, we do dispute the £150 million figure, but I don't doubt that the figure would be a high one. There are other measures in the report that should give us a scope for glyphosate reduction, but I accept it doesn't. It doesn't offer us a complete cessation. Do you want to go to question 2?
Yeah, thank you. The background in this motion gives very little detail about the harmful effects of glyphosate to nature or human health. I wonder if you know we are currently experiencing the 6th mass extinction of species, and insects are taking the biggest hit. The UK's flying insects have declined by 60% in the last 20 years. In 2019, Biological Conservation reported that 40% of all insect species are declining globally, and that a third of them are endangered. Shall I stop for a minute? No. Okay. The first thing to do to reverse this trend is to stop poisoning them with herbicides, insecticides and pesticides. As well as destroying their food sources, glyphosate has a direct health impact on bees. It alters the beneficial gut flora of bees, making them more susceptible to disease, and it harms the bees' navigation abilities, which endangers the hive's survival.
Thank you. The committee report is clear that glyphosate will not be used on soft surfaces, flower beds, shrub beds, etc., where bees and other insects would acquire their food source. As per the Health and Safety Executive publication, glyphosate is not a neonicotinoid. These types of pesticides are insecticides and are used to treat crops against the actions of certain insects, such as pollen beetles. This is not how we operate weed control in the public realm. The report also cites at 1.5 academic studies on the Tarazona et al. 2017 around concerns of the potential effects upon insects and bees, so it does recognise this school of thought. Glyphosate will only be used on weeds which have already emerged in pavements on a spot treatment basis. The trials so far using this methodology have yielded reductions in usage down to around 1/3 of what it previously was. The committee report is clear that residents can help us further reduce usage by removing weeds from hard surfaces from pavements in their neighbourhoods. That is to say, when teams arrive at a street, if there are no weeds, no glyphosate will be used. Would you like to proceed? Question 3. That's a swap. Yeah.
In 1.4 in the motion, it is noted that glyphosate is deemed to be safe and efficacious for use as a herbicide. This ignores the conclusions from the International Agency for Research on Cancer, the IARC, which labelled glyphosate as probably carcinogenic. Independent scientific studies have revealed numerous acute and chronic effects of glyphosate-based herbicides. In addition, the ingredients added to glyphosate products may be toxic. Many of these chemicals are trade secrets, and we rely on the manufacturers to ensure the products have been tested to be safe. Studies have found that glyphosate-based herbicides can interfere with various organs and biochemical pathways in mammals. It causes imbalances in gut bacteria, and some studies have found that glyphosate appears to accumulate in human cells. At low concentrations, it damages liver, kidney, and skin cells, and long-term effects include cancer, infertility, pregnancy problems, birth defects, and respiratory diseases. Please amend 1.4 accordingly.
Thank you. So, actually, before I read the written answer, I mean, if you have, do send me links to studies that show the things you've just claimed there, because I will read them. The answer, as per Tarazona et al. 2017, since glyphosate was introduced in 1974, all regulatory assessments have established that glyphosate has low hazard potential to mammals. We acknowledge that the IARC reported in 2015 that glyphosate was probably carcinogenic. The carcinogenic status from the IARC places glyphosate in the same tier as red meat and night shift working. The IARC conclusion, however, was not confirmed by the EU assessment nor by the Joint World Health Organization Food and Agriculture Organization evaluation, both of which used additional information beyond that reviewed by the IARC in coming to their decision. 1.4 of the report paraphrases the Health and Safety Executive national regulatory stance, so this section is not the opinion of the authority, but that of the relevant regulatory body.
Also in 1.4, the motion mentions current legislation that does not mention that the EU may well be about to ban glyphosate.
This is a very painful answer for me to read. Britain is no longer a member of the EU, so this would be out of scope of the report. On the 19th of September 2023, the Commission put forward to the Member States a revised renewal report and a draft regulation which actually proposes the renewal of approval of glyphosate's licence, not the removal of it. Question 5, please.
Do you realise glyphosate is found as a residue in many of the food products we eat? It has also been found in water, wine and beer. Testing has revealed that glyphosate is present in people's urine in Europe and in urine and breast milk in the USA.
Yes, this is reflected in section 6.3.2, where the report recognises that glyphosate is used in food production in the UK. It is routinely used in cereal crops such as wheat and barley, hence why it appears in end-user food and drink products such as wine, beer and bread. And I would add, actually, in response to this coming onto the agenda and the questions you've asked, I did read read the abstract of the Canadian study, which found residues in large numbers of food items, including some organic ones, which is and described and I now understand the reasons for widespread use on crops before harvest, which does seem to be a significant cause of source of human exposure to glyphosate, which wouldn't result from spraying of weed on the highway. Question 6, please.
GMB represents around 630,000 workers, including those most at risk from exposure to the chemical, such as park staff, gardeners and agriculture and forestry workers. Dan Shears, GMB National Officer, said, GMB is clear, the guidance from the World Health Organization should be heeded, and glyphosate must be treated as a severe health risk to the general public. In situations like this, surely it is better to be safe than sorry. Employers should stop using glyphosate immediately and replace it with safer alternatives, many of which have been trialled by councils in the UK.
The IARC conclusion was not confirmed by the EU assessment or the recent joint WHO-FAO evaluation, both of which used additional information beyond that reviewed by the IARC. 1.4 of the report paraphrases the Health and Safety Executive National Regulatory Stance, and this is not the opinion of the authority, but that of the relevant regulatory body. You've already had that answer. I've got to say, again, in reading around this, I wasn't entirely impressed by the safety of pelargonic acid either. It does seem quite, but and I can understand why it isn't licensed for use on hard surfaces. Question 7, please. Yeah, that's Izzy. I've got Izzy is down for question 7. Is that? Do stay near the microphone if you've got to come back. Heather is up soon, so if you want to find your way. Oh, and Jane. So Jane is up before Heather. Yeah.
In 2.2, the motion mentions the report that was commissioned by Cardiff City Council. It's important to realise that this report was written by Dr. Daniel Jones. He is Managing Director of Advanced Invasives. Customers of advanced invasives include international herbicide producers like Bayer, the manufacturer of glyphosate. They have a long history of misleading the public and legislators about the safety of their products, notably neonicotinoids, which are now recognised as extremely harmful to bees and other insects.
The Health and Safety Executive, as the regulatory body, are clear that glyphosate is not a neonicotinoid. These types of pesticides are insecticides and are used to treat crops against the actions of certain insects, such as pollen beetles. This is not how we operate weed control in the public realm, which I appreciate is an answer that you've already had. We are at the, or close to the half-hour limit for public questions. With the agreement of the committee, I would propose to extend this section for 15 minutes, which I think ought to be enough. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Question 8, please.
In 2.5, it is stated, annual usage figures of glyphosate decreased from 140,000 litres of diluted product being used across this city in 2020, pre-trial, to currently less than 50,000 litres of diluted product being used in 2023, representing a huge overall reduction in the use of glyphosate-based products in the public realm. But 2023 is not yet at an end. Is 50,000 litres an estimate for the whole year, or is it the figure for just part of the year? If so, what fraction of the year does it include?
Figures reported were to just before the report was prepared. It is acknowledged that a small further increase may be encountered, but given the incredibly rainy summer weather, spraying had substantively stopped by the time of writing, as this product is not used in adverse weather conditions where the rain fastness time is unlikely to be achieved, i.e. if rain is forecasted. Question 9, please, Jane.
Thank you. The questioner submitted incorrectly quoted the recommendations. I must apologise to the committee for that, but the questions remain the same. In 3.1, it is proposed to continue spraying glyphosate alternatives on soft surfaces. My questions are, does this include tree pits and areas surrounding trees? And is the committee aware that glyphosate damages fungi on tree roots that help trees collect nutrients and water? And it's very important that trees, for tree health, that they not spray glyphosate near them.
Thank you. So the answer I have is the answer to your original question, which obviously you've now changed it.
Yeah.
If we can get you a written answer to that fresh question, we'll do that. Can we do that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Question 10, Heather, please.
I'm Heather Worden. In 3.3, you admit that the glyphosate-free trial was unsuccessful at evaluating the impact on the highway of not applying any chemical weed killers. That's a shame. You have not identified what went wrong with the trial or how it could have been done better. Obviously, you should not repeat the same mistakes, but surely further trials should be possible on different terms, having learnt from previous mistakes.
The areas of the trial were subject to a large number of residents and third parties spraying the highway. We have worked with Edinburgh Council, more detail in the report, and listened to our consultation outcomes, and we'll work with residents and volunteering groups to embrace this willingness to help remove weeds on the highway and reduce the amount of chemical we have to use. Question 11, please.
In 3.7, it stated, the Council are working with Amey to put in place a contract change notice pursuant to the contract, which will enable a relaxation to some of Amey's contractual obligations to manage weeds across the Council's land. Exactly what changes to the contract being proposed?
A temporary 2-year relaxation of performance requirements relating to weed growth in grass verges and hedgerows and in shrub beds to ensure they are not penalised for alternative products being less efficacious.
In 7.2, it's noted that the total potential cost implication of complete cessation in a worst-case scenario could be as high as 150 million of additional expenditure. Has anyone costed the worst-case scenario of continued use of glyphosate? A court in the US, which ruled that Roundup, which contains glyphosate as its key ingredient, was liable for a terminally ill man's cancer, and ordered the company to pay $289 million in damages. This was the first case of its kind, but there are another 8,000 similar cases pending in the US alone. Amey workers are regularly observed spraying glyphosate without masks. When Graham Rowe, who is unable to be here today due to COVID, asked one why he was doing this, he said that masks are scary for the public. There's a big concern that in the future, Sheffield Council could face massive compensation bills if workers ill from glyphosate use take them to court. Apart from the possible legal costs, the worst-case scenario for continued use of glyphosate is the continued decline and possible extinction of many species of bees and other insects. Has anyone costed the implications of that?
Employees transferred under 2P regulations from the council into the private sector in 2012. Amey manages any risk to their employees, which includes detailed risk assessments, COSHH assessments, and appropriate controls and personal protective equipment policies, as well as health surveillance for their staff.
In 8.1, the motion concludes that approval of the recommendations will allow a continuous reduction in the use of glyphosate in highway areas across all of Sheffield. You really need to set a timescale for this reduction. Secondly, the motion says it will allow the opportunity to work with residents in various areas of the city to promote awareness and encourage action in line with the nature emergency outcomes. This will achieve an important step in the city's response to the declared nature emergency. Working with residents on this is to be welcomed, but it's vital for the council to take the lead. You have declared a nature emergency, so you must act on this now. Thirdly, it says it will allow alignment with the timescales for further central government guidance and or legislation and future licensing of information on the future licensing of glyphosate. We think this government is friends with the chemical and oil industries. Sheffield can't wait for them to take action. Sheffield needs to take the lead.
Thank you. So on your first point, with reference to earlier sections, timescales are outlined in the report which are aligned to likely forthcoming clarification from central government on the usage of glyphosate prior to 2025. On your second point, we agree, and we hope the volunteer sector and those who are actively engaged in wanting to help us reduce the use of glyphosate will spread the word that if there are no weeds in the pavement, then no glyphosate will be sprayed, and encourage people to be more involved at community level, as has been so successful for Edinburgh Council in their pesticide-free Balerno campaign. On the third point, the Health and Safety Executive are the relevant licensing body for pesticides in England, and once we get clarification, we will be able to return to the committee to seek a decision on the way forward. Thank you for your questions. The next question that I have is Joel Gilbert.
Hi there. I haven't got the exact question in front of me, so I'll paraphrase if that's all right. I wanted to speak sort of on behalf of pedestrians and pavement users, really, especially my area. I live in Pittsmore. And I wanted to know what the council's doing to kind of address the balance towards people who use the pavement and away from motorists. As an example, I was a baby in my house and I was pushing the buggy up the road and up the pavement, sorry, but I couldn't use it because both sides were taken up by cars, vans and so on, which made access impossible. So I was pushing it uphill in the middle of the road. I did a quick walk, and it's not just a one-off. Those have been there for weeks. I did a quick walk yesterday. There were two dropped curbs that neither of them I could go down. I had to come off the curb and round them because the cars parked there. there was a Sheffield City Council contractor parked on the pavement somewhere else on the double yellow line as well, which meant I had to walk into the road. And on my road, there was actually a wheelchair going up the middle of the road because they couldn't use the pavement and actually had to swerve out the way of the car. So I just wanted to know what the council's planning to do to kind of redress the balance away from people who drive, and it's not everyone, I use a car, but who thinks the road is for the use of cars and that the pavement is also for the use of cars.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I'll read you this answer and I'll have another couple of comments. That there is no general legislation outside London for an offence of pavement parking. A specific traffic regulation order must be written to prevent parking on pavements in any locations that the council would want to prohibit pavement parking. The TRO must be consulted on. Signs and lines also have to be installed to show where pavement parking begins or ends. The policy to introduce pavement parking restrictions has designated the city centre as the only location pavement parking enforcement will currently be introduced. The responsibility for transport policy and any members of this approach sit with the Transport, Regeneration and Climate Policy Committee. However, locations where double yellow lines are installed may also allow the enforcement of pavement parking on the pavement. The double yellow line applies from the centre of the road up to the nearest barrier or wall, so may encompass a pavement in some circumstances. Double yellow lines also need TROs, which must be consulted on. Requests for new parking restrictions are dealt with by the Council's Senior Transport and Infrastructure Service. They have a limited budget, which is used to prioritise new measures in the areas of greatest risk. I would encourage any evidence of the risks posed in the areas of the city to be sent to transport@sheffield.gov.uk. In addition to raising concerns with the Council's transport team to collate evidence, I would also encourage any instances of obstructive parking on the pavement to be described in this incident to be reported to the police via the non-emergency number of 101 or online at smartcontact.southyorkshire.police.uk. The police can enforce obstruction of the highway without there being traffic regulation order present. Two things I'd like to add, just further to that last point. There is a particular operation in the northwest of Sheffield by the Northwest Neighbourhood Policing Team called Operation Parksafe, which does, show greater, has showed greater results on some of these issues. And last I saw, it may have closed now. Last I saw, they were consulting on whether to extend that to the rest of the city. So if you look at Northwest NPT, you may have a chance to make your views known on that. I would certainly said it's been a good scheme. The other thing is that we are considering a parking enforcement policy later in this meeting, which doesn't exactly touch on those areas, but it does, it does strengthen some of the enforcement, operationally, some of the enforcement powers that we have in terms of how they're applied. And some of that does relate to HGVs, I think, on verges and pavements. So that may also, hopefully bring you some benefits. Thank you for coming. Final question, James Martin.
Good morning, everyone. So I've summarised this given some of the time pressures. So Disability Sheffield is supportive of some of the work to increase the ability to take enforcement action on issues such as pavement parking and blocking of dropped curb crossings, we heard earlier. There are many people affected, and it can put people into quite vulnerable and dangerous positions, and in the worst instances prevent people from exiting where they live by active travel measures. So the question is, please can the committee ensure that officers work with the disabled community so that the reporting mechanisms that are mentioned in 4.2.2, I think it is, bear with me, 4.4.2, yes, are accessible to everyone, as this issue affects people with a variety of different impairments. So it needs to work for everyone so that the problem can be understood, more action can be taken. Secondly, can the committee look to ensuring that regular reports or information is published on the number of reports received from the public, and that needs to include progress, stroke action taken, and a geographic breakdown of the issues. I think that will really help us to understand how this affects different parts of the city, and House of Ely? And finally, number 3, would the committee be willing to ask officers to engage with the disabled community, such as the Access Liaison Group, on the variety of impacts that come from different offences? I think there's going to be a need to prioritise and plan action and operations to detect offences and deal with them. And I think it's really important that the biggest problems that are making it hard for people or impossible for people to get around are dealt with first. There may be some safety implications as well, and working with the community to develop a framework, I think, would really help buy in the community, give them confidence on what's being done. Thank you.
Thank you. The committee would welcome Disability Sheffield's input into the designing of the reporting and feedback function. The committee would like to see inclusion of the statistics requested in the annual parking report. The committee would welcome the input of the Access Liaison Group in helping shape the priority areas. I think we need to continue this conversation, is basically the answer. Thank you. That concludes the public questions. We now move on to members' questions. Do we have any members' questions? No. There are no members' questions. We now move to the work programme. Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So the work programme report is starting on page 19 of the agenda pack. On page 20, you will see that there's been the reference from the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee included regarding the street tree inquiry, which has been incorporated into the work programme. On page 22 of the pack, you also see any amendments or additions since the last report to this committee. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any comments on the work programme? Alexi.
Can I move an amendment to the work programme to add reduction of single-use plastics to the work programme?
Yes. What? Can you be more specific what you're asking us to consider?
Just for the committee to take to a future meeting.
Okay.
A report on how to reduce it.
I think we probably need to
within
have
our committee.
We probably need to have a members' discussion as to exactly what we're asking for before we have a report to the committee. But yes, if we can add that, thank you. If members are agreed that we add that, if there's no dissent, okay.
I don't think there's an issue with that as long as we know what the terms are and what we're going to do with it.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll do a discussion that's open-ended.
We'll discuss that in a briefing. Okay. Thank you. Sue.
Thank you. I was just looking at the item on the future waste collection service, which has already been raised in the questions, which is now in the programme for February. But it seems to still wait for the government guidance. And I just wondered, firstly, is it likely we will actually have the government guidance by then? Are we confident we'll have it? And if not, is there actually anything we can do to start work on this before we get that guidance? Because we could be kicking this down the road for some time, if not.
And I think you're absolutely right. I'm not holding my breath at all. I think particularly with the Prime Minister's announcement that, you know, we're not going to have so many recycling bins or whatever, the whole thing may be quietly ditched. But yeah, Richard, if you want to comment on this.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, absolutely right. So we're working on the strategy now. So there's quite a lot we can do in preparation for that, and obviously working with the knowledge briefings with councillors on developing that. So yeah, we're not waiting until February to start the strategy.
A much better answer than mine. Okay, so I have a couple of comments on the work programme. Just Shana, yes, go ahead.
Thank you. On page 21, the learning and policy development outside of the committee, it does say that the nighttime visit to the CCTV control room to be confirmed. I believe we've actually been there. Yeah, I agree with Sue. We have.
We did, and it was fascinating. It was on my list as well. But yes, go. More. Carry on.
Yeah, I do actually, Joe. And I know that's a surprise to you. I'm just looking at this whole thing and wondering whether it could be cyclical because, and just be repeated several times, because some people did miss some of those things. I think I missed the Street Tree Partnership one. And if we're going to say that it's a continuous improvement by us as members, then these things will always be changing, and we would want these also to be repeated many times.
Yes, I think the point is well made. I think it's worth repeating each of these. There's also probably another half dozen or a dozen things elsewhere in the portfolio that we could usefully go and see. So I'm conscious that I think we have to take that away and update this to a programme going forward, don't we? I think that's a piece of work for us to consider. Richard, yeah, nodding. Okay, but yes, probably. Anything else, Jonathan? Oh, okay, very good. Mark?
As discussed briefly in our members briefing meeting on Friday, the waste trials in Page Hall are going to be commencing very shortly. So if we could maybe put it on the agenda for a committee visit to see what work is being done and what lessons are being learned from that'd be really, really helpful. Obviously, that's really timely as well, so I'm conscious of time pressures on that because that work will be committing within a week, actually. So I don't know whether we can fit that one in, but if we could, I think it'd be really helpful, at least noted what's going on there.
Yeah, I agree, that'd be helpful. I think we did discuss it in the briefing, didn't we? But it's not appeared in the work programme. Is that are we getting that visit? Is that
Yeah, we can confirm that. We'll set that up, John, and we'll get access for once off that visit.
Excellent, thank you. So the items I've got, Hackney Carriage Fairs, I didn't see, but I think we are planning to make a decision on Hackney Carriage Fairs. There's a evidence gathering exercise going on at the moment. Recognising that fares haven't been reviewed since January 22 and costs have gone up substantially, or January 21 possibly, and inflation has been significant in the intervening time, so Hackney Carriage Fairs do need a review. The other thing that I just raised an eyebrow on the work programme is it says in a comment, it's only a briefing, so maybe it doesn't hugely matter, that the flood strategy was under this committee. Which page am I on? It's I didn't note it. I just scribbled it down on the page I made all my notes on. There's a reference to so flood strategy. Can I have some clarification of to what extent flood strategy is our committee rather than TRC? Because it does seem to there are different kinds of flooding and there are different kinds of response, and a lot of the intervention is capital anyway, so that kind of also belongs elsewhere. So I don't know if I can have a clarification of where all that lies. I don't know if, Richard, you know off the top of your head.
Thanks, Chair. I think we'd put it on the items for committee briefing and to add to the agenda. We're unsure whether that does sit directly with Waste and Streets or within TRC, but I'll take that away as an action and confirm that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's page 31. I found it now. Okay, if Sinead.
Okay, dry powder removed. Page 29, sexual entertainment venues, which is supposed to come to our February the 14th, how out of sight. And it says report on developing a policy. Can I just ask what is being done to develop this policy? Who's being consulted? Or is that just going to come to us on how to actually develop a policy as opposed to bringing a possible policy to the committee? It's something I'd certainly be interested in being engaged in, any preparation and consultation around that issue.
Yes, my reading of it is a report on it's the start of a process of developing policy, not a policy that's coming to us. But yeah. So yes, that would be most welcome, and obviously the time to do that is then in February. But so we're not. Yeah, I'm not aware of work that is going on prior to that report in February, other than the writing of that report. I don't know if there is. Obviously, Councillor Richards should be kept in the loop of it.
Can we ask to have some sort of briefing on what is being proposed around it, etc.? Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a yes. Tim?
Have we not got a policy? Because I was previously on the council, it must have been about 2014 we had a sex entertainment venue licence policy. We've not got one anyway. No.
There is a policy. It was due for renewal in, I think, 2018 or something by the then licensing committee, and the committee rejected it. So we have a policy that is older, substantially older than that, and so it would be a renewal of the, a refresh of the policy.
When we talk about developer policy, isn't that a good place to start to see where we are now and how we're moving forward with that? No, it's potentially, not as if we're a blank piece of paper.
Yeah, no, we're not absent of policy. There were drafts that came that have been circulating since then, and the rejected proposal from that year. So there has been work done on those. So obviously, yes, so there's a number of starting points we can look at. Mark.
Just as a timely element, because I'm aware James Martin's still sat behind me, if we are going to be looking at this policy, we need to be working out to stakeholders, and I know the disabled groups are part of the stakeholder discussion. So ideally, if we could make sure we include all them, and James, if you could feedback that we'll be doing that work and to remind us to include you in those conversations, I think that would be really, really helpful.
Thank you. Yes, point well made. Anything else on the work programme? If not, can we agree the work programme with those changes? Agreed. Okay, I've taken silence as assent. Yeah. Okay, next item is Q1 budget monitoring. Hi, do you want to come to the mic and introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jane Wilby, I'm Head of Accounting. The purpose of the report is to bring the committee up to date with the 23-24 first quarter's financial position. The full report was presented to the Finance Committee on the 11th of September. At Q1, the General Fund is forecasting an overspend of 17.6 million against a net revenue budget of 487 million. This represents a 3.6% overspend against net revenue budget. In 21-22, the Council identified 70 million of General Fund reserves, which we were able to draw on to manage the risks associated with the delivery of budgets and savings plans. After 2 years of budget deficits, we now have 30 million left. The fund was intended to assist with the delivery of our budget improvement plans and stabilise the delivery of our base budget. If we do spend another 17 million this year, we will only have 13 million left to cover any risks into next year. The BIPs continue to be a challenge this year, and of the 47.7 million General Fund savings we need to make, it is forecast that 37 will be delivered, which represents a 78% delivery rate, which is an improvement on 22-23's, which was a delivery rate of 65%. There are 3 key drivers of overspends in the Council currently. Adult social care, 3.2 million overspent, which is better. It's a better financial position than it has been in recent years. The underlying trend is somewhat offset by in-year government funding, which is one-off. The Education, Children and Families is 8.9 million overspend. This is high-cost residential placements are the biggest cause for that overspend, alongside savings proposals that are not delivered to increase foster carers. There's further demand in home-to-school transport costs, and that's going to create a 3 million overspend against budgets this year. In housing, we've got an 8.4 million overspend due to homelessness support in temporary and supported exempt accommodation. This relates to the increased demand and the shortage of suitable accommodation, leading to an increased use of hotels and temporary accommodation and unregistered providers for supported exempt accommodation that are not fully subsidised by the DWP. These are key areas of overspend faced by local authorities nationally, and this has been reflected in first quarter forecast positions. Our core city comparators are also noting similar issues, particularly regarding children's social care. The Waste and Street Scene Committee is forecasting an underspend of 800,000 against a net revenue budget of 64.2 million. The table in section 1.7.4 shows a breakdown of the budget for the committee and shows a 1.2 million underspend, which is actually additional income in parking services above their budgeted levels. So this underspend in parking is somewhat offset by smaller overspends across other services. And an 800,000 underspend represents just a 1.2% deviation from net budget, which is less than 0.5% from expenditure budgets. So overall, quite good budgetary control within the committee. The medium-term financial analysis was presented to the Strategy and Resources Committee on the 7th of September, which set out the Council's forecast position over the 4 years and identified a funding gap of 61 million, 18 million of which will fall in 24-25. A table in section 1.6.7 notes the committee targets for 24-25 and the key assumptions around that. The report requested that services develop solutions to bridge that budget gap for 24-25 and ask committees to bring forward proposals to the November policy committees, to the November meetings. At the same time, continuing to work hard to bring the in-year overspend down through ongoing work on recovery plans to support the delivery of budget improvement plans. The waste and street scene budget target is set at 2.6 million for next year. The report is to note the financial position of the Council and the Committee at Q1 23-24, and the next update with the Q2 results will be due at the December Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Comments, questions? Mark.
Thank you, Jane, for the report, and thank you for the work, and thank you to all the officers and this committee for making sure that we are sticking within our envelope and we're not being spendy unnecessarily. So I know that Joe and everyone else on this committee will work hard to preserve the public health element and the street scene elements that we in this committee do, because one thing I would want to make sure that are reflected in terms of any proposals coming forward from officers is that we recognise that changes in the street scene and changes to food health standards and the increased asks from government on our officers are reflected in terms of those equality impacts, because what may seem like minor changes to the street scene can have profound impacts on people's mental well-being and the public's realm in general. So it's really worrying times, and I thank you for your really diligent work, and thank you for all the professionalism in going forward with how we carry on with this. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. No, I echo those comments. It's easy to look at a budget like this committee and say, well, you must be able to find, you know, 2.5 million out of that. I really struggle to see where I would find 2.5 million out of this. If you take out the fixed contracts, we don't really have control over. A lot of what is left is statutory services and really vital statutory services as well. And then, well, the council might want to think again about its city centre strategy. If it doesn't want to spend any money on the city centre, then that's a way of saving some money. But that's a question that should be taken above our pay grade, I think, if that's what the council wishes to do. Tim.
One of the things I was looking about some of the underspend. You're talking about that we're not making the savings are set to fall short of target, but the city markets was something that we deliberately, as a committee, decided that the benefit of not making the savings that we were asked to make would far outweigh in terms of the economy to the city of Sheffield. Would be, are we still sticking to that? Would be a.
So, I mean, just on the markets, we are going to come back to the markets service charges. I think we rejected the proposal because we felt it was too much and it would put traders out of business. But there is a deficit there, and we are going to have to close it. We're going to have to make some progress towards closing it. So that will be coming back for a further decision. Yeah, I had a meeting with traders in Crystal Peaks just the other week, where they raised all their concerns, and and I explained to them that the question would come back, that the figure that was put before us last time was too much, but there will be a conversation about that.
Do you have any sort of ballpark figure on that at all?
I think we have to wait for the report to come to us, and for the discussions leading into that, which obviously happened between the spokespeople. Alexi.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you for the report. It does really set out the stark challenge that we've got. I think it said 2.5 million savings in here, but it's gone up to 2.6. Is that what it said? Yeah, and just to echo what Joe said, I do struggle to see how we're going to do that with these big contracts that we're bound to. So in that case, we need to find ways of increasing revenue. We said that there was an underspend in parking, so parking has been successful. In raising more money than expected, and I think we need to seriously consider looking at the fees, parking fees, and also other things that we can do to raise money. I know that environmental services, other local authorities use our environmental services, so we need to be thinking seriously about corporate opportunities and ways that we can raise revenue from some of the services that we deliver. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I quite agree, Alexei. If we could get more people to drive into the city centre and park, that would improve our budget position. Excellent, excellent idea. Any more comments, questions on this? If not, can we agree the recommendation, which I think is just to note the report, isn't it? Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay. Thank you, Jane. Moving on, we have the review of the Amey Performance Challenge. Are Amey here? They're going to be on soon. Well, shall we go to another item and come back to this if they're on their way?
No, they're going to be on Zoom.
Oh, they're going to be on Zoom. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Right. It's only it's too soon. We've only had an hour and 10 minutes. Okay, if they're on Zoom, yes. I see the screen. Okay, so can we have officers introduction, and can we have Peter on the Zoom introduce yourself after the officers, please?
Thank you. So my name's Darren Lowes, Interim Service Manager for Highway Maintenance Division, and we'll be talking through the Amey Performance Report for Highway Maintenance Division today.
I'm David Wayne, Interim Service Manager for the other half of Highways Maintenance Division, and I'm just here in a supporting role on this particular report.
Thanks, and Peter, let's see if we can hear you.
Hi, yeah, morning everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Is it loud? So we were warned we'd managed to just test the audio stuff, so hopefully you can hear me. Peter Bamfield, Business Director for Amey.
Thank you. Okay, so would you like to introduce the report?
Chair. Thank you, Chair, and morning all. In summary, there are a series of recommendations for the committee to note, and I propose to give a background to the related issues from the report. So, Streets Ahead covers all aspects of highway maintenance. It's a significant scale and scope in terms of the work that's carried out, and Amey's role includes delivery, planned, cyclical and reactive works. It also involves dealing with service requests and complaints. So what I'd like to note is a service improvements plan. So in terms of achieving contract compliance in relation to carriageways and footways that had been brought to committee previously. Wish to note the good performance in carriageways and footways in terms of the overall road condition and how that compares nationally. And also in terms of carriageways and footways, the good performance in dealing with hazardous potholes. So those that are typically reported as being greater than 40 millimetres. There is also a note about discussions around lower category defects, and that forms part of the closed Appendix 3. So those are typically those that are potholes less than 40 mil deep in carriageways, although there are risk-based assessments related to those potholes. Also like to note the good performance in dealing with fly tipping, and that's also covered in the customer charter appendix. So which shows how well those are being dealt with. I believe the figures are 100%. Also note the good performance in street lighting in terms of 100% of lights being fully operational in the quarter recorded. It's monitored using a central management system. And also note the quick repair time in terms of lights when they are not operating. Also, as part of that, note the reduction in carbon emissions and energy consumption and the benefits in relation to those issues, which again is a positive contribution to the city. Again, in terms of improvement, there's the issues related to cleansing standards, and so the 4 main points to pick up from there are in terms of using an area-based approach, the reset of cyclical cleansing, the city centre trial cleansing, and the planning and targeted leaf clearance as well. I would then look to mention some of the challenges. So as we've already mentioned, the lower category defects. Another area of concern is in terms of the response times for customer enquiries and complaints, and also related to enquiries raised by councillors as well. So again, that is covered in further detail in the closed section of the report. The other areas of concerns include drainage, and that's where there are more complex issues to be addressed, and that's been done as part of a 12-month programme. So an example of that could be where there have been utility works, and those have damaged the gully connections or gully pipes, and therefore it requires a longer time period in order to make those repairs, and it also may involve liaising with the utility companies. Yes. And that's in terms of recruitment. So there's currently a interim lead of the service, and it's expected that a dedicated assistant director will be appointed for highways as well in the near future. So, Dave, would you be okay just to talk a bit more about the cleansing?
Yeah, so just to quickly summarise the changes to street cleansing. Obviously, we've taken on board feedback that we need to do more to improve level of detail in city centre, so that's commencing next week on the 2nd of October with a new model where staff will, rather than walking point to point and cleansing along the way, they will deal with dedicated zoned areas of which they will have personal ownership. We're hoping that will drive an improvement and make a more welcoming city centre on the run up to the Christmas period for shoppers. The second leg of that is an eastern trial which spans the east and northeastern LAC area, and that will be again dedicated zone street cleansing staff working in that area rather than working on an input specification where they attend streets on a routine basis. They will instead attend streets on a dynamic basis based on their area-based demand. They will also have a dedicated supervisor, and there will also be a new area highway representative from Amey covering that area who will act as a designated point of contact for elected members and local area committee in the area. We continue to work with our colleagues at Amey to negotiate a cyclical reset on the 17-week cycle, in which we'll provide an uplift, obviously, and then maintain thereafter on suburban streets. And as Darren's already alluded to, we are awaiting from Amey as well a detailed leafing programme, which we hope to be able to share on the council's website, so the members of the public and the elected members have a forward look on when Amey will be coming to carry out leafing, in the hopes that that work can be done on a more cyclical basis rather than being reactive like it was last year, because obviously if they stop doing a specific task and move elsewhere in the city, then getting back on cycle at that point is very difficult and problematic. So again, just managing that relationship with a bit more information up front and published in the public realm.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to add anything at this point before I open it up for a discussion to members?
Sorry, Chair, was that a question for me? It's difficult
Yes,
to
sorry. Do you want to add,
one.
do you want to add anything to what's been said by officers before I open this to a member's discussion?
Yeah, just to echo David's last comments there on the cleansing trials, obviously, yeah, quite a lot of work and time has gone into having a look with the authority at what that best would look like in terms of just trialling a new way of working, both in city centre and that Eastern LAC trial. So, yeah, we've got plans as part of that of the council to monitor that progress and adapt the plan where necessary, because it is a trial, and so we have to be ready to have a look at what the results are. So we've got regular monthly check-ins, and we'll be able to report that back going forwards.
Thank you. Yeah, I thank you for that, and I do appreciate the flexibility that's been shown in dealing with some of these particular local issues. We have a contract that's kind of written for the whole city, and the whole city is not the same. So I appreciate the flexibility, and I must say before I go to members, we are going to give you a bit of a hard time on some issues, but we do recognise that there is good performance in a number of areas. It's in the nature of these things that we focus on the bad news and not on the good news. Some of it was obviously referred to by Darren in the introduction. I appreciate, for example, I will mention when we had the issue in Stannington with the burst water main, that the gritting teams responded to and worked with council officers to make sure that the relief efforts weren't impeded by snow on the roads. So I appreciate that kind of flexibility being shown as well. So with that, on that note, I will open it up to members. So I saw Alexi first. These questions and comments. I'm not going to separate it, and obviously questions for Amey, seeing as they're here. Most welcome, Alexi.
Thank you very much, Chair. Well, the first thing I'd just like to say is on accessibility and the fact that the report was really late. It didn't come to us until late on Friday afternoon, and for members that work and have other childcare commitments and other commitments, it's really hard to properly scrutinise the report when it comes that late. I'd also like to add on that members of the public who work, I mean, it's really difficult for them to access this committee. So this is not to have a go at you, Peter, but I find it strange that members, like people that are reporting to a committee, can zoom in, while members of the public cannot zoom in to ask their questions. So that's just first a point of order, I suppose, really.
Just on that, let's deal with that actually before we come to the rest of the thing. I mean, it's an interesting point about members of the public zooming to ask questions. That's on us as a council, isn't it? That we haven't allowed that. It's not, we can't criticise anybody else for it. I thank you for raising the issue of the report, though. I was going to raise that. I don't know if there's an explanation that officers can give as to why this was a two-follow report, given that it's been expected for quite a substantial time. Richard.
Thanks, Chair. I'll pick up those two items. The first one on Amey joining by Zoom, Councillor, is it's just an unfortunate last-minute issue. So to make sure we can go ahead with this session, we've had to call Amey in via Zoom. It was planned to be in person, so I can only apologise for that. On the issue around the report, please accept my sincere apologies for the delay in getting the final report to members. This was caused by a number of issues, including delays on internal sign-off, sharing with Amey in the spirit of our long-term partnership with them, as well as being open and honest. And finally, some last-minute fact-checking. So we needed to make sure we got the absolute fact before presenting to committee. and there was some changes which we need to make at the last minute. There is some learning here which I'll make sure, and officers will make sure we pick up and we adapt for future reports of this nature. I can only apologise for the lateness.
Thank you. Alexei, do you want to carry on?
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you very much for the report, even though it was late saying that. There is like some good things in there, promising things, especially having sort of name contact for elected members. I'm going to be, that's going to be really useful. And obviously, it is very welcome that Amey are now in compliance with the contract. So obviously, that's really good in terms of Category 1 defects being dealt with. However, I think it is disappointing that the issue with Category 2 defects, and well, one of the questions there would be to Amey, do you think it's right that we leave these defects and leave them to develop until they get Category 1 defects, and would you say that that was actually in the spirit of the contract, or just so I think what I'd ask for is that Amey come with a service action plan to address the Category 2 defects that we've got. I think perhaps one of the reasons that they're not taking them seriously is because they know that we can't take the
Alexei, I just think you're in danger of straying into information in the closed appendix.
Okay. So yeah, I suppose that's the first point I'd like them to address in terms of Category 2 defects, and also other smaller defects as well, but also the issue of not responding to customer inquiries and complaints, because lots of my constituents and myself at times have received replies saying that you are looking into something, but actually receiving the same reply over a number of months in a row, which actually says that they are being dealt with and being investigated, but there's no detail on that. So it gives people the impression that they're not actually being dealt with or investigated, and leaves Amey open to the accusation that you're actually misleading residents by sending out holding emails that actually you're not dealing with it. So yeah, so it's really frustrating as well for residents when they see Amey going out. We've heard from a member of the public, Andy Buck, about people coming out and measuring around potholes, but then not doing anything. So that's also very frustrating for residents. So yeah, I'd just like to see if you could address those two issues, particularly around the minor defects, which are not being addressed currently, and then also responding to customer inquiries with holding emails that might be a bit economical with the truth.
Thank you, Alexis. Did you get all that, Peter? I think the questions are the Cat 2 defects and the responding to inquiries. Are you happy with your performance in those areas and what you're planning to do about it?
Yeah, so firstly, I'll start with the customer service element. I think it's important to put into perspective the scale of the monthly cycle of customer inquiries or complaints. We regularly deal with thousands per month, and the majority of those are dealt with and closed out satisfactorily. But we do and are aware of an improvement area that's been highlighted around pretty generic, I would say, generic acknowledgements, and some of these can be repeated. A lot of these involve where the cases are more complex, and so we don't have the detailed information necessarily to give to that member of public or even yourselves. And so historically, and it is more of a historic thing, that a generic response has been given that says the contract allows us to put a sort of holding response there and extend that period by 28 days. So that's one point, that we're on the hook for a penalty if we don't put that reply in. So, and like I said, this is a historical thing that's been done, but we do recognise that that's not the best position for members of the public. So we are trying to work on a plan and looking at a better way of being able to communicate something of use to that individual. And so we are working on an action plan with the authority. We are having a restructure. We have just completed a restructure of our customer service team. So partly some of the frustration I think that comes through in the report about the length of time that this is taking to get going has been around that restructure as well. And we are working on that action plan. We've got a new manager in post. We are promoting some additional team leaders within that structure. So now we'll be able to knuckle down and be able to communicate what that action plan is going forwards. But yeah, this is something that Amey wants to work on and improve as well to provide the best service. But it's just important that some of this is put in perspective, because it's not representative of the whole service. It is an element of the service where cases are quite complex and involve third parties, and so it's not always possible to give a full and final response within the contract period. And on the second point around these lower category defects, it's good to note that we are compliant on the hazardous and emergency potholes. And a note right at the beginning of the meeting that highlights the overall performance of the Sheffield network. It is in the top, handful of authorities in the country in terms of road condition, and that's the value through the PFI that's been attained over this last 10 years plus. But we are working on a new asset management plan from here on going forwards. And a lot of this was centred around the default position that we were in last year, and it's good to hear that you're pleased with the fact and the position that we've got back on compliance overall on the life cycle carriageway and footway programme. But this is a bit of a fallout to a degree of that process, where we changed our approach and our asset management approach in dealing with compliance through the contract, whereas before we might have done whole streets and where we might have got less Cat 2 defects. Some of those are a bit more exposed now, in that they might fall in between the sections that we're compelled to do under the contract. This is a method statement commitment that Amey put forward and committed to in the contract, that we would rectify these Cat 2 defects within a 28-day period. What we now need to do is look at a better asset management strategy in terms of dealing with these going forwards, and we are looking at working on that with the authority by the end of the year. But it is a very complex piece of work for us to look at the predictive model that we have in terms of carriageway deterioration from now for the next 14 years. So this is not just a piece of work that we're looking at for here and now up to Christmas, for example. It's a strategy that we're working on to be able to predict and model the rest of the whole of the Sheffield network for the remainder of the contract. So that's integral to our planning, our resource levels, our supply chain, our finances. So there's a large piece of work there to do, and we are on with that. We are looking at rolling an interim position out, so it's not that we're just pushing it down the road. We are looking at working on that, and we should start to see some evidence of that through Q4 this year, and then from the new contract year from April next year. So we'll continue to work with our authority on sharing that, and we believe that this will address a large number of these Cat 2 defects. Also, just to note that the 6,000 and odd quoted in the report, they're not all potholes in the carriageway. There's a large proportion of those that are minor footway defects or curbing defects, like a chip on a curb. So that, just to get it in perspective again, it's not necessarily all potholes in the carriageway. And of that 4,000 and odd that's quoted that are carriageways, a large proportion of those are in the forward programme for this year also, because they're affected by the normal annual surfacing programme as well.
Thank you for that. So almost everybody has indicated. So I'm gonna mix up the order slightly so we don't go party by party, because obviously I wasn't looking both ways at the same time. So Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a list of questions, so I'll not go through all of them. What I'll do is I'll limit my first intervention, possibly later, depending on what goes on. This is questions for both officers and for Peter. Thank you for your attendance today, Peter, even though it is at distance. In section 2.8, it's really welcome to see that we're putting in place new structures in terms of management of the contract. And it's often reported that, and it does within the report itself say that the Amey contract is self-monitoring. And it's good to see that we do actually go out and investigate the work that's being done and such like. So specifically for officers, not necessarily for Peter as such at this stage, but I'll come back to Peter's question later. Are we sure that we have got sufficient staff? I know we're putting in place new structures, and I get that, but I'm kind of really wanting to make sure that we as an authority are robustly monitoring the work that's done, because as elected members, we'll all get criticism of like who's, sorry Peter, cover your ears for this bit, who's allowed this shoddy work to be done, is no one monitoring it. So for us, I think, and for the public, it would be really helpful to know that we are getting to a position where we can sufficiently robustly challenge everything and see how that takes. And also, part of the dashboard data, and this one does relate more to you, Peter, and the reason I'm asking this is an email popped up while I was sitting here looking at my screen. When we're looking at the roads and the maintenance, we've got a gold-plated contract here. We are being outperformed by Southwark and Portsmouth. So any views of what they're doing better than what we're doing would be really, really grateful. But one of the questions that popped up, and you mentioned the investment element that you're going forward on, is do we use preventative measurements like ground penetrating radar? Because we'll all see bits of our roads where we're getting mosaic breaking up of the roads. Now, to me, that feels like we've got a substrata failure of that road, so the road is failing. But we won't automatically see those failures. And you mentioned about Stannington and the issues with Yorkshire Water. And in Stocksbridge, for instance, we've had an ongoing, long-standing issue of Yorkshire Water's pipes leaking and eroding our substructures of our roads, causing them to collapse. And that gives us a massive expense and obviously passes on an expense to Amey. So that ground-penetrating radar, those different kind of technologies that could be utilised, is that what Southwark's doing? Is that what Portsmouth doing? Are those elements that they're embracing that we have yet to? And will Amey be doing that? But on the carbon footprint element, we're reporting in terms of vehicle usage, and we're reporting the kind of types of diesel engines and electric mix, petroleum electric mix that we've got. One thing we haven't reported in there, and I'm not sure whether, Peter, you could comment on this, is tarmac has a massive hydrocarbon footprint. When we're allowing defects to go from, say, a Cat 1 to Cat 2, then surely that means we've got to use a lot more hydrocarbons to rectify that. And I'm wondering whether delaying those interventions is actually pushing up our carbon impact, and should that not be reported in terms of how we are looking at part of that, rather than just simply fleet mix, but actually the materials we're using within our area. So there's probably three questions there for us to look at in terms of investment, carbon impact of dealing with defects later, and also are we monitoring it robustly enough? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. So officers, do you want to take the first one and then?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Council. I'll pick up the first one around the structure and the capability. As you recall, part of the street tree inquiry, the recommendations from Sir Mark Lowcock was to do that very very same thing were to assess have we got the capability and capacity within our own restructure. We're underway with that. We've done a full restructure now. We've done an assessment, and it's contained in the response to the street inquiry, which we'll bring into the next committee, I believe. Some areas we are improving. We've got a very experienced interim head of highways, and unfortunately can't attend today because she's got a foot up in the air because she's got a significant injury. That's on an interim basis. We've now recruited to the permanent assistant director post of highways, who's a highly qualified highways engineer. They start in January. We're doing a restructure internally as well to make sure we've got that capability and capacity through the team. And that includes the people on the street as well, the critical bit, more inspectors, more people going out, actually working with members of public and local area committees to understand what it feels like to be in that community and their issues. So absolutely right, Councillor, and we are underway with that process, making sure we've got the capability right.
Thank you. Peter, do you want to pick up the other two?
Yeah, so on the second and third points then, so I don't know specifically why, you know, there may well be an authority or two that are ranked slightly higher than Sheffield on the figures, but we're driven by the requirements of the contract that we have in Sheffield under the PFI. So it's very, very strict and transparent level of compliance and condition scores that we have to meet for against very, you know, quite an extensive range of performance requirements for carriageway condition and footway condition. So our treatments that we're doing out on the network are driven by the requirements of the contract. Maybe other authorities have a bit more leeway in terms of how and what they apply, but we strictly follow the compliance. As we saw last year, you know, we had to do a lot to get back to a compliant state. So that kind of goes into this third question. There are other materials that we probably haven't used yet on the Sheffield network, and that's part of what we are looking at now in the asset management plan, to undertake a sort of suite of highway asset maintenance techniques. Preventative maintenance is one of those that features highly, and that's something we haven't done much of at all to date, because if you can imagine, the first 5 years of the contract was a capital investment. We did, you know, significant amount of resurfacing works, and we're getting to a point now at 10, 11 years into the contract where some of those roads and some others would require some preventative maintenance treatments, which are a different type of treatment, and the asset management model is going to be looking at that. And that's how that, Mark, will address some of those Cat 2s that not necessarily are formed and they're right there now on the network, but would delay the deterioration of that carriageway or those extensive carriageways where we've treated them before. So we are looking at that in terms of going forwards. But in short, we're really driven by the contract requirements on condition scoring as to how we choose the works programme each year.
Thank you. I think Mark threw us slightly by asking 4 questions and saying there were 3. So the other the other one was about whether you want to use ground penetrating radar to detect Yorkshire water destroying the substructure of the roads, and whether you or we have any recourse against Yorkshire Water for doing that.
Sorry, Chair, I couldn't hear any of that. I think we're struggling with your microphone in particular.
Sorry. I think
better.
I'm too quiet. I know, Sinead. I'm so sorry. I think Mark, the question I thought was Mark's question number 2 was the one about using ground penetrating radar and detecting damage to the substructure of the road and possibly attributing the cause of that to Yorkshire Water's mains always leaking in Stocksbridge. I mean, I guess it sounds like a very specific question, but I suppose the question is that I'd be interested in is, you know, to what extent can we hold Yorkshire Water liable for the damage they do, whether that money ends up coming out of your pockets or ours. You know, it seems in principle that Yorkshire Water need to be encouraged to get their act together.
Yeah, again, really struggling to hear, but I think I picked up the point that I missed about ground penetrating radar and what benefits that would give us in terms of a view of the network. So it is something we are actively doing. We're just letting a contract now to one of our supply chain to undertake ground penetrating radar for us. So we are rolling that out across the network. That will help us inform our asset management strategy going forwards as well, to see what the makeup of the condition of the roads are more wholesale. The information we've been using to date to do that is road coring. So basically we have a drilled core through the carriageway every 50 metres on the network. That is, you know, historically how those areas of carriageway have been viewed, but the GPR survey that we will be doing will give us a better extent of the whole of the network, and we will be using that going forward in our designs and our choice of treatments. In terms of what it would tell us to the extent of third-party Yorkshire Water, for example, condition or impact on the network, remains to be seen, but we will note that and look at that. So if we have any historical areas where we have issues with Yorkshire Water infrastructure, it may well help us with our conversations or our approach with those roads going forwards.
Okay, thank you. I've suddenly noticed the time. I've got everybody has now indicated to speak, including myself. Although 3 of my questions have been asked, so you know, hopefully members. I won't ask them. No, they've already been asked. Can I take Tony and Sinead in one go, and Tim, and hopefully we can accelerate this slightly. The last question, I think, was far too interesting, Mark. I think we need to do less interesting questions and focus more on performance challenges. Yeah, I did get you. I'm mixing it up, Christine. I'll bring you in the next section. Good. Tony.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you. Sorry, what's your name?
Peter Bamford.
Peter. Sorry, thank you, Peter. What I'm interested in really is the length of time that it's taking. So, I mean, we have had a gentleman here today in the committee here raise a question about a particular road that's been like it for 12 months, where it's really bad for potholes and what have you, and wants resurfacing. And there's been 5 or 6 notes on the data sheets to say, and just getting put back and put back and put back. I would just like to know how long it takes to, and I've seen these coloured lines on the roads in my area, as I represent the area where this gentleman has come from. I've seen these lines on the road and they just keep coming, and when they fade, they put more lines on the road instead of just getting the job done. I'd just like to know, you know, that's one question. And the other question is, we were talking about the ground penetrating radar. We have a situation in my particular ward where we've got Severn Trent Water that that keeps coming up and damaging the road surface on Queen Street in Mosborough. And the Amey have said that they will not resurface the road until Severn Trent have done all the remedial work that needs to be done to prevent it from happening again. This is an ongoing issue. Just a couple of questions there. Thank you.
Thank you, Sinead.
Right, again, I have 2 questions, and it's proper 2, not 3.5. My first one is about these holding emails that get sent out, because I sent an email on the 14th of July, and I got the thank you for your email dated 14th of July. So I wrote to the person who I'd raised it for and said, look, it's being responded to which they said, fingers crossed. And then on the 27th of July, I got another whole letter saying, we're still investigating. And I sent that to my constituent, who said, I think they think they can keep bluffing and you'll go away. And I said, no, I won't. And then on the 9th of August, I had another letter saying we need another 10 days and you'll get a further update by the 23rd of August. So I wrote back and I said, I think this is my 3rd or 4th email from you. And this is your latest deferral of giving me a response. And I said, if you can't give me a response by the 23rd of August, I will escalate my request. And no, I still haven't had a reply. So this is me escalating publicly about the fact that I have not had any response to my inquiry regarding flooding at Norfolk Park Lodge, which is a council property which we don't want to be damaged any more than it has been, and we'd like the residents to be able to live thinking that they're not going to be flooded each time it rains. So that's my first question is, am I going to get a reply at any time? But also, how many other people are getting this chain of emails saying, ooh, we're sorry, give us another 10 days, and 10 days, and 10 days. And I don't think that's very helpful. My other question concerns leaf gathering. I live on Lion Street in Burngreave, and unfortunately it's not the sunny side of the street, and it's the side where all the leaves that come down from all the fabulous trees that the council planted, and they all land on my side of the street, and we eventually have to move them off the road because cars are slipping. So we eventually had to pile them up against the walls of our house, of our gardens, but because the pavement is getting completely wrecked and people are slipping and sliding. And finally, Mr. Sagira, my neighbour, and I actually ended up using my snow warden shovel, having to put all of the leaves for our side of the street into numerous sacks and then actually disposing of them thoughtfully, not fly tipping, because no response, nothing done, our street not swept since I don't know when. And of course all the neighbours come and grumble at me because although I'm not their local councillor, they know I am a councillor. And what am I doing about it? The answer is shoveling it myself, but that isn't good enough. So I would like to ask about the gathering of leaves during the autumn. I know it's also a problem on Norfolk Park Road in my own ward, and that a lot of elderly residents are worried because slippery leaves are a scary thing as you get older, as I know. That's my 2 questions, Joe.
Thank you. Let's just take those 2 actually, because we'll lose track. Peter.
Yeah, just dealing with those last 2 questions first. Then leafing, we are looking at a different strategy this year in terms of leafing and dedicated resource. It's been changed in terms of the management of that service within our grounds maintenance team, and we are due to publish a cyclical schedule of the leafing programme. Again, we did have problems last year with a particular weather pattern and two different falls in leafing that we've not really seen before, and also the sharp frosts that we had that don't help the clear up of those leaves as well. So I think we will have a better approach this year. There will always be a case where the weather catches us out. We don't know exactly when a storm might hit. Much more leaves might come down all at once, and then we're on the back foot. That might affect the programme, but we will work to improve that service this year compared to last. In terms of the catalogue of generic responses that you referred to in customer services, I've made a note of that, and I'll look into that specific case. But I think that's highlights an example that we previously talked about of a service that we're looking to improve in terms of ensuring that we get better dialogue with people that write into us, rather than just purely stating that we'll get back to you time after time without actually telling you anything. So it's an area that we're committed to improving.
I should look forward to monitoring it.
Thank you. And there was Councillor Downing's questions about one. I think one was about the how long it takes. I think the answer is possibly if it's servicing the annual programme, it'll be sometime the next year. But the question was made: how long does it take if the road is recognised as needing resurfacing? And then there was another one about flooding, that you weren't dealing with a road until Yorkshire Water had addressed the flooding issues. I must say there's a Prospect Road in my ward is damaged by water that is just coming from natural springs. I don't think the water gets into Yorkshire Water's preview before it undermines our road. So I'd be interested in how you propose to deal with that as well.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of markings on the carriageway, our inspectors are out there all the time. They may be marking up urgent defects, and some of which we've already talked about might have been the category 2 defects. In certain areas we do have a bit of a backlog that we've addressed or talked about earlier. If it's deemed that it falls into either a category 1, it'll be done within the 24-hour period, and then the permanent repair within the following 28 days. But the category 2, as we've said there, we're looking to improve that. So some of those teams are out constantly doing those, and some are not necessarily getting done. Some you may see that might be marked up, but they become part of a scheme in the annual life cycle programme, so that they'll be dealt with as part of the scheme, which would be in the coming calendar, 12-month calendar. In terms of Queen Street, I need to catch up with the team as to exactly where we are. I know Richard Eyre and I have had sort of dialogue in regards to Queen Street and Yorkshire Water involvement, but I think as far as we know, if there's work to be done that's within failed sections within the contract, then they will be in the works programme for this year. But if they hadn't failed on the last year's survey and its ongoing effects of Yorkshire Water, we kind of need to get into better dialogue with Yorkshire Water. We have had a case recently where they are funding or have funded a scheme where their works impacted the highway. So that's something that with the council's backing, we will try and push.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to accelerate this if we can. Sorry, Darren. Yeah.
Briefly, so thank you. Just briefly, so in terms of where Yorkshire Water issues had led to deterioration of the carriageway, the council officers had worked with Amey to pursue a contribution from Yorkshire Water. That was for Whole House Lane, and Yorkshire Water have indicated that, so that contribution will be made.
Thank you. So I'm going to take Tim and then Christine.
This actually relates to that, because you allude that you work with other utilities to repair roads. I mean, we recently had a case in Sandygate Road, because this bears direct relation to that, where there was a leak from Yorkshire Water, and it was running down the road and destroying the carriageway on Sandygate Road, that you repaired before Yorkshire Water had actually repaired the leak, so that it went running down the road again. That's just one thing, because I want to know whether we can get how you deal with these utilities. And then there was a separate one where they're digging out the road and putting some new pipes in along Sandygate Road, but then you were doing works on Coldwell Lane, which meant that people couldn't actually were being directed down a diversion, then being redirected by Amey, I presume, back up the diversion to back where they were. So they actually couldn't get round and out, you know, in this circular, tortuous way. So is there any chance we can have what the protocol is that you have on how you deal and talk to other utilities? Because one of the things I'd like us to also do is find out from Yorkshire Water how they deal with other utilities and the other utilities, so that we have an understanding of how you talk to each other, because we're constantly told about this, and then you know, it just beggars belief sometimes, and the idiot things where people are 200 yards away from each other, obviously not talking to them, putting diversion, send them in the same way.
We've got that question. So, yeah. We've got that question. Thank you, Christine.
Yeah, mine is a very similar question. It's about how we work, how Amey and the council work with all the other utilities, because Amey will come and resurface a road, and then the electric companies will come and dig it up again, and often their repairs aren't as good as the new one, and it just seems we're endlessly digging up and resurfacing roads, and that must be very expensive. And I would like to know if we have a policy or some way of discussing, so that if utilities dig up a road, how do we guarantee their repairs? And I think Darren mentioned it. He said, you know, sometimes it damages the gullies and things, and then we have to cover the costs. So I would like to know what the overall council strategy is, dealing with all the multiple utilities that are always digging up our roads, so that we just don't have to keep redoing it and we get these poor quality repairs when we've just had a lovely road resurfaced. And the second part of my question is much more to do with Amey. And it is about my ward, but I'm sure it happens everywhere, is we've had half a road resurfaced, which we're very grateful for, and we think it's lovely. The only trouble is the other half of the road, where the join is, has now got massive potholes, and I'm sure they're coming up to be category 1 potholes, and that must be a result of poor workmanship. And I've been calling this out for a while, but I've been told that nothing can be done for another year. There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to put these to you, Pete. I'd ask you to be circumspect in the sense that some of these questions aren't really for yourself. So it's largely a comment about utilities digging up roads. And I think the question for diversions is probably a traffic management issue. So I don't feel you need to answer those. But if you could, I guess, address the point of how you work with utilities, that would be useful.
Yeah, so we regularly in contact with the utilities companies. When we have planned works, we notify them under the New Roads and Street Works Act. We strictly follow that, where we notify the utility that we're going to be doing works, and there's a period of time that they're locked out from that. However, as we find, and everybody finds in the country, that the majority of the reason why the utility company needs to go in and do work is classed as emergency work, and so they're perfectly allowed to go do that emergency work, even within that lockout period that is defined under the New Roads and Street Works Act. It's totally out of our hands and I think the authorities' hands. But we do and are constantly liaising with them. We do chase them for contribution where we can. For, you know, if we have to go out and put out traffic management on something that's unsafe, you know, we're regularly pushing them and get a contribution from them in terms of recompense for that work that we do. Which they should be doing. So, yeah, I'm afraid it's the New Roads and Streets Work Act that dictates what those periods of time are, not Sheffield's contract or Amey's contract. So we try our best with that.
Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Chair. Very quickly, I'm conscious of time. I suggest that we bring our network management team to a knowledge briefing session. And also we've got Yorkshire Water coming to this committee in December for some of these questions as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to take Mike and Sue. I want to wrap this session in the next 10 minutes. 5 minutes if possible. So again, if somebody's already asked your question or something similar, don't feel you need to ask it. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. And these are all new questions. The first one, I think, probably would go to our compliance team, because I've chased this with Amey. It's where you have a category A road, and it's got a perfectly smooth surface, but there are actually underlying bumps. Now, for a normal car going over that's no big deal. The driver and passengers take the bumps as they go along. But when HGVs go along, sometimes their loads lift up and come back down, and that's what people nearby hear and feel. And it's a bit like feeling an earthquake as the vehicle goes by. The second one is that there's been a review ongoing for about 18 months now into the concrete road and pavement services. And we're still waiting for some outcome from that review as to how they're going to deal with that. I've got a particularly bad case on Remington Avenue. I will name that one because that's been going on for quite some time. The third one relates to where you have a dip in a road and you get an accumulation of ice in winter as a result of water runoff. The road, it's been dealt with from water falling in from one side, and residents are really appreciative of that, but it does require structural work from a cul-de-sac road feeding into the road that's got a dip, and that's effectively been held by Amey for well over a year now, and still waiting to find out whether work is ever going to be done to rectify that. And lastly, we have a small amount of heritage street furniture. I'm referring to the sewer gas lamps. It was great that they got restored, and they were all fitted with solar panels, but over time some of those solar panels have ceased to work. And somehow, again, the Amey complaints process doesn't seem to recognise that. They can respond to standard street lighting, and that's great, and the street lighting in the city is very good and up to a very high standard, and we're all very appreciative of that. But it does mean that there doesn't seem to be any mechanism for picking up on the faults with the heritage sewer lamps. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Sue, do you want to put your questions?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously share lots of the concerns of things that have already gone before, but I have a couple of specific questions. The first one, I'm not sure if this is actually for Amey or for council officers, but one of the issues I understand around the programming of street clearance, and I'm thinking particularly of leaves, but I'm sure it applies to other things, is that work gets interrupted by having to go and deal with urgent requests. And I just wonder whether we may get fewer urgent requests if the public and indeed councillors had better access to what the planned clearance is. I mean, if you wanted your road doing and you looked and you see it was planned to be done in the next week or two, actually you might not bother, and it might actually help Amey or help council. I'm not sure where the responsibility lies if those sort of programmes, and I would include in that mowing, and I would also include in that the gritting programme, if people actually had more access to information about their own street. So that's my first comment. My second one is particularly about rural roads. So I noticed the inspection regime that you have for main roads, and then also you talk about side streets. But I just wonder if you could clarify about rural lanes. We have some rural roads that run through the Mayfield Valley and through Rivlin Valley that are narrow lanes but are very heavily used by traffic, and every year they need resurfacing, and when they're resurfaced they're great, but we know full well they'll be in a very bad condition the minute winter starts, or when we start getting icy weather. Is there anything more substantial that could be done that meant they don't need this huge amount of work on such a frequent basis and keep the road surface better for longer? Thank you.
Thank you. Pete, did you get all of those? Can I?
Yeah, so there's quite a few to go out there. Just I'll work backwards. So really on the inspection regimes, it's the same inspection regime as for an A road city centre as it is on country roads. So they're set inspection regimes that are driven by the contract, so that there shouldn't be any case where rural roads, country roads are getting less attention. And again, they follow the same contract process in terms of condition scoring. So they will be addressed for those failed sections in the coming year's programme. Regards cyclical activities, yeah, we do get our cyclical activities interrupted by high volumes of reactive service, and that's one area of the trial. Actually, the trials that we're looking at is to try and get back to a cyclical service, a more regular cyclical service. Publish what constituents can expect as a service, and it may well be that in the case where we're called out to remove one crisp packet, it is taking resource away from scheduled cyclical maintenance activities. So if that street's due a clean in the next 3 weeks, then it may well be that a very low level of intervention is not required, and it can wait until that cyclical cycle catches up. In terms of heritage street furniture, I'm not sure I'll take that one away. I'm not sure if that's Amy's responsibility. We do get others that are city centre management, but I will check what the situation there is with our street lighting team. Did you have a name for where you mentioned there was the dip in the road, water and ice in winter? I can take that one away and have a look at it.
Baxter Drive and the water runoff from Baxter Close.
Sorry.
S6.
Sorry, could you say that again?
Baxter Drive, water runoff comes from Baxter Close. And they're S6 postcodes.
Yeah, I'll take that one away and look at it.
Sorry, just to expedite this, can I suggest that operational issues such as the street lighting, obviously we've got dedicated officers in our team. If members just see Darren and myself after, we'll take these operational issues away and feed them into Amey rather than...
Thank you. Yes, no, thank you for that. Yes, I don't want to spend time on that here. Yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to say in response to that? I think the question about there being dips in the road which lorries go over is probably a standards issue rather than a performance issue, isn't it? So I don't know if
there are performance requirements for depressions, but that'll be picked up as part of Peter's cyclical survey. Obviously,
they're raises actually, not dips.
All right, okay. Let's stop there. I'm going to ask one of my 2 questions that are remaining, and that is I just want to be confident that we're going to meet the deadlines we're committed to for the remaining outstanding streets from the street tree programme and the roads that were affected by disputes over the street trees. Obviously, March 24 for designs for all the remaining streets and March 25 for actual completion of the works. As a council, we've committed to this. I understood that Amey were also committed to this. I appreciate that you need things from us as well as, it's a 2-way process. But the answers to the question I gave to the member of the public earlier was, it talked about all reasonable efforts rather than, which worries me slightly that it's not as strongly, we're not as certain as we would like to be. Can you, I mean, can I impress upon you the reputational damage, I think, given the pain that the tree dispute gave us, if we don't meet those deadlines?
So I'm really struggling to hear the audio there, but I think you're picking up on are we in a position to meet the deadlines for the designs and delivery of the CIP street trees? Yeah, I mean, we're working through that now. There's a lot of people involved. It's not just the highway authority, it's the whole partnership and wider residents to be able to get agreement on some of these. But we are working through them. We've got some designs now into Sheffield Council. They've been through road safety audits. So we're on programme to date. We have got a programme that we are continually debating with the council and the partnership, but we're on programme in terms of delivering those designs by March 24. However, the outcome of what those solutions are is not within Amey's gift, but we will endeavour to that commitment together to try and progress those designs. Some of them still will involve difficult decisions. Some of them still need, go to consultation with partnership and residents. So it's the outcomes that we're not 100% certain on. But we are putting that resource there. We are working through with the council. We will be presenting some options to the partnership through October. So at the moment we're progressing that.
Okay, thank you. I think we're out of time now. I think I'd like to draw this to a close now. Everybody's had a go, and no. We're eating into the time. We've got 15 minutes left in the meeting. Unless we extend it, we're going to have to extend it to consider the rest of the business. I would like to propose that we agree the recommendations on page 2 of the supplementary pack. Is that agreed? I'll take that as agreed. Thank you very much. Thank you, Peter, for coming by Zoom. Thank you, Peter, for coming by Zoom, if you can hear me.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Darren and David. Next, I propose we take a comfort break now for, what is it? It's 20 past 12. It's 20 to, right, 12:30 sharp. I'm going to resume, and we're going to have to extend. Thank you.
This one's my colleague, David.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just wanted to start by saying, at SCC, we do recognise, the protest and the presence that was here from Extinction Rebellion, as well as other interested parties this morning. We are working across services within the council, including highways, parks and countryside, and are all routinely working to try and consistently reduce our levels of usage. We've managed successfully to reduce our use down to around a third of what it previously was, which I think is a really promising step in the right direction. Looking forward towards the next 2 years, our recommendations to committee today are asking members to agree for us to continue on what's been a successful trial model so far and endeavour to try and reduce usage further over this period. Asking members to recognise the 2022 public consultation outcomes from our consultation about glyphosate and deliver more work around communications, information and education when it's seasonally relevant, in the hopes that we can educate members of the public as to what they can do to help us further reduce our use of glyphosate. And also asking members for this continuation of methodology to last through to 2025. Obviously, if we hear anything back from central government prior to that, we have committed that we will return to committee with an update on glyphosate when it's pertinent to do so. Obviously, we've covered very much already the financial risk, which sits around 150 million. Just to reiterate to people, that's based on around 10% of footways failing between now and 2037 and a significant uplift in operative numbers. I think we're looking at 42 additional operatives for additional street cleaning plus additional machinery, sweepers, etc. So that is a worst case scenario, but that's a realistic worst case scenario. We've not gone over the top in our modelling. Taking note of those financial implications, we do have a change in law clause within the PFI contract, so asking for this extension through to 2025. If we get an update on the legislative position from government, we feel it would put us in a more advantageous position for our negotiations with Amey at that point. So we may be able to push that number downwards from the worst case scenario. I'd also like the committee to note that there are currently no alternative chemical products to glyphosate which are on the market and licensed for use upon hard surfaces such as pavements. This is why we are using glyphosate only on a spot treatment basis for those instances. Everything else we are using alternative to glyphosate. We've also trialled alternative means of treatment during these last 2 years, including the hot foam or foam stream as it's sometimes known. We found these treatments to be very expensive and carbon creating in their use and application. Obviously, we've covered with the previous questions that glyphosate remains licensed for use in this country until December 25 and is approved for use by the Health and Safety Executive. Government ministers have indicated that they are all going to follow the science, to use their COVID terminology, with regards to future licensing of the product. And I think we've covered most of the other points around the IARC. We do recognise that, obviously, research. We do a lot of academic research ourselves. We speak to a lot of peer authorities, and we are endeavouring to capture any best practice and incorporate it into our highway maintenance wherever we can. Amey are required to operate an integrated pesticide management plan, which includes other options such as sweeping, hand digging, and manual weed removal where possible to further reduce their use of weed killers on the highway. We are going to continue to do that, and drives such as the Eastern Lac cleansing trial should allow dedicated staff to focus more on specific delivery of tasks like that at neighbourhood level.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I ask members not to ask any interesting questions? Just questions that you know, inform your view of the recommendations or of the obviously the service from Amey.
Joe, have we agreed to extend?
We have. No, that's a good point. Yeah, we need to do that in the next 5 minutes. Yes. Can I have agreement?
May I propose that we extend the meeting to finish our agenda?
Well, for half an hour. Can we say half an hour? It's half an hour is the
35 minutes.
Well, no, we can't do 35 minutes. We can only do units of half an hour. So, is half an hour agreed? Thank you. Yes, Mark, did you have a hand up? I hope it's not interesting.
I'll try and not be interested.
Very interesting, Mark.
Being interesting is not usually a problem for me. I'm usually not interested. 3.6, 3.7. Thank you for the report, David. It's unfortunate it's not had a greater outcome, but I do appreciate that. 3.6 specifically, it does relate to some of the questions from the Extinction Rebellion presentations before. When I read this part, I was kind of minded that it doesn't actually mention the street tree wardens and Amey, and that's particularly around the treatment of weeds or unwanted vegetative growth out of street tree beds. So I would like to see kind of elements of that included to be more substantive, possibly even lax, although I say that cautiously because I'm not quite sure what that would mean. It kind of feels like local communities having a say over their street scene would be really, really good. I am worried about the reduction, but I get the understanding of the contract change notice. I can see that if we are going to say we'll be less stringent on this, again, that does need to have some kind of public member buy-in, and it does need to be asked on a kind of more focused nature to kind of make sure that every area gets the street scene it wants, rather than having it imposed on it. So that's basically it. But I do roughly welcome this, and I just have some concerns around 3.6 and 3.7. I'd like to see the change at some nature brought back to us as a committee to make sure we understand what that change means and how that will affect our communities if possible. Chair, thank you.
I'm going to take multiple questions. Alexa.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the officers for bringing the report and also for the work that's been done. I think the 2/3 reduction in glyphosate use is really positive and very significant, and I'm glad that there is a commitment there to further reducing it. I'm just wondering how much further do you expect to be able to go in reducing glyphosate use? Could we expect similar trajectory going forwards? And I'm just wondering why there wasn't any targets in there, even indicative targets.
I'm concerned, you know, where it says here, I mean, I don't want to stray into the contractual stuff, but I mean, there is this sort of feeling about some people when there's been the trials of not using glyphosate, is that's then meant that Amey don't do anything to remove weeds. I mean, how do we monitor these? You know, I know this thing about this inconclusive trial and things, but occasionally one gets the impression that it's a good excuse not to do anything and then maybe redeploy. I don't know. Do we have what mechanism do we have in place?
Thank you. We had I have had correspondence from one of my constituents, Mr. Graham Rowe, who is ill with COVID, and we wish him well. And he said that even though glyphosate is something we want rid of, he is very vehemently in favour of it being taken away. He did mention that both the giant hogweed and Japanese knotweed might still require glyphosate as the only thing that kills them. And as they are considered, whatever it is, they're what's that thing that you put up signs about them? I'm being rubbish here. Thank you. There's actually a sign up sort of saying beware the knotweed on my road. So what are we going to do about sort of something like that, where clearly it's something that is harmful and invasive, but we will want rid of if there is no glyphosate?
Thank you. Do you want to take those questions?
Yes, so in terms of how we manage Japanese knotweed and giant hogweed, glyphosate absorbs into the plant, it's translocated, so it moves through the plant almost in in a way a circulatory system would do in a human. This is obviously effective when you're treating Japanese knotweed, which has got a significant network of rhizomes growing underneath the ground. It's less, obviously a contact herbicide will be less effective because it doesn't address that rhizome. Now, Japanese knotweed will regenerate from a piece of rhizome as big as your thumb. So, we do need at a national level and at international level people to be innovating and creating new products which are efficacious for use against these. Otherwise, Japanese knotweed would have to be deep excavated, but sometimes I know opposite IKEA, I think they went down 8 metres in order to get all the rhizome material out. So there is a non-chemical alternative, but it does involve digging craters. Yeah, so that's that one. In terms of the question prior to that from Councillor Hogan, the Brincliffe trial was a pesticide-free trial, but street cleansing was still undertaken. The issue obviously was intervention from third-party citizens, whether that is people who are homeowners, gardeners, or other people interested working within the area to carry out their own weed removal or weed spraying. So that's why we called it an inconclusive trial, because obviously some pesticides, there was evidence of pesticides having been applied within the community. Instead of repeating our mistakes like Extinction Rebellion's representative said earlier, we've said, well, let's harness that. So we spoke to City of Edinburgh Council about their pesticide-free Balerno project. We listened to our 2022 consultation outcomes, and citizens are really engaged in wanting to help us reduce spraying. So rather than having completely no spray zones, we're just going to focus on the educational element of that, which seems to be represented in a lot of best practice and what our citizens are feeding back through consultation that they want to see. Like we'd said in our responses to council questions earlier, if there are no weeds on the street, we won't spray any glyphosate, and that's the way we see forward. Designated street cleansing teams like we're trying in the east will be removing growing media such as your soil, your silt, your leaf build-up, and hopefully being able to do that in a more structured and focused manner at neighbourhood level will remove the need to spray as much glyphosate moving forward, which I think also touches on what Councillor Diamond's mentioned prior about how we continue to show improvement, and it really is that focused street cleaning to remove the growing media and resident engagement to ensure that that's it. If there are no weeds, no glyphosate will be sprayed on hard surfaces. Is there anything I've not addressed?
Thank you. So Alexi's question was, what's the target? How much further can we go reducing glyphosate with this kind of approach? Do we have a number?
In terms of targets, we are reluctant to give one because weed growth is very much climate reliant. So if we get a long, warm, wet summer like we've had this year, it can be quite challenging. If we get a long, hot, dry summer like we had it back in 2022, it baked all the weeds off, and actually it was a lot easier to manage weed growth. So we're very much at the mercy of climate change.
At the mercy of the weather, it sounds like. Yeah. But okay, and then Mark's question related to 3.6 and 7. My question, possibly it's similar on that, is if we're doing a contract kind of relaxation in terms of, I guess, aesthetic standards, and saying, okay, we're not necessarily going to spray for aesthetic reasons or not as much. And possibly Tim touched on this as well. What control do we have if we think it's not being done right to say, well, actually, we do need work in that area? It's not just a license to do less work. And if it were licensed just to do less work, would we expect something in return from that from Amey? You know?
Yeah, correct. So Amey have a clause with us that they're to be no better, no worse in terms of risk profile. So the contract changes we've proposed are effectively that we recognise they will be using products which are more expensive and less efficacious, but the trade-off is we will tolerate slightly more weed growth within the public realm as to make that a fair trade-off, so that they're not unduly penalised for this. In terms of moving forward, if we end up in a no glyphosate situation, obviously Amey will be pressing for some kind of financial compensation to mitigate the additional resource required, but they won't be allowed to just get away and let weeds grow through all the footways across the city. We have got a duty to maintain the highway network, so there will be an expectation that the contract is wholesale changed to manage that using either manual removal, sweeping or something else.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm not seeing any more hands, so I propose to move to the recommendations if we're ready. Alexi.
I'd actually like to propose an amendment to the recommendations. Well, firstly, I forgot to say earlier, but thank you for XR for coming in and engaging. I think they scrutinised the report really well and probably better than we could have done. But in terms of the amendment, I don't think that we can wait for the government to do the right thing. I think government have shown time and time again that they're not going to do the right thing, and we can take a more proactive approach. So I would like to change the recommendations and replace them with to the continuation of the citywide reduction in the use of glyphosate alongside publication of indicative targets for year-on-year reduction. And we can have reasons why they haven't been met based on weather and climate. But this is just like what, all things being equal, how can we expect reductions to continue? In addition, for officers and Amey to bring a report to the committee in 6 months' time on options to phase out the use of glyphosate by 2025, including costings for maintaining current service levels using alternative methods, and costings and impacts of reductions in service levels using alternative methods. So it's important to note that is not committing us to doing anything. It's just to have it in public what it would mean and what it would look like and what it would cost. And then finally, with the final bullet point, to replace that with to implement a suite of educational and informational measures on the nature emergency to build a higher tolerance of acceptance of vegetation growth and consult on what approaches should be taken in regards to growth on hard surfaces with reference to health and biodiversity.
Right, I'm conscious that these are officers' recommendations. Can I have some advice on how we might handle Lexi's proposal?
Yes, sure, Chair. So obviously the officer recommendation doesn't change as such. Councillor Diamond can propose an amendment which the committee can vote on. If that amendment is accepted, well, sorry, you need to second it first, then there's a vote. Then I would probably say that officers should be given the opportunity to comment on that amendment before and members to ask any questions before a vote's taken, just in case there's anything officers want to contribute to that might change members' minds on whether or not they wish to vote for that amendment. If the amendment is accepted, you would then vote on the substantive.
Yes, okay, okay, no, I appreciate that. Have you got a text for us? Yeah. Can you circulate that? And is there a seconder? Yeah, okay, so yes, Christine's seconded it. Well, I mean, I think I scribbled down roughly what you were talking about, but obviously the text, I think we do all need to see the text before we can consider it.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I did try and make a quick note, but it would be helpful if everyone had got it in front of them.
Chair, could I suggest that we will be discussing this at briefings on Fridays at a regular thing, so I think that we can maybe move forward. As you rightly say, Alexi, it's kind of difficult. Building agreement sounds like we're bullying the public into accepting a certain outcome. So that particular word in itself, I know that's not what you're wanting to do, and my viewpoint is that I want to have greater discussions with the public. But you've already commented that the late nature of the reports that we've received are unsatisfactory. So may I suggest that we accept the proposals as they are, but set up a dialogue between all our parties to make sure we can actually instigate what you're suggesting. because not having seen it means it's difficult for us to actually understand what you're suggesting right now. And I think we want to make sure we get this all right, because certainly building tolerance is kind of wording that I think could be inappropriate in this nature, and I don't want to be trying to amend things on the hoof, because I know where you're coming from.
Yep. Can I weigh in? I'm sympathetic with that. My scribbling didn't last much longer beyond bringing a report in 6 months on a proposal to phase out entirely. That was, and did you then go on to say how that would be funded, or did you not deal with that?
Do you want me to read it again?
Yes, if you could read just that bullet point again.
Yeah. So, for officers and aiming to bring a report to committee in 6 months' time on options to phase out the use of glyphosate by 2025, to include costings for maintaining current service levels using alternative methods, and costings and impacts and reductions in service levels using. So it's not mentioning funding, it's just to get the cost or indicative cost of what that might be.
Yeah,
so it's in the public
okay.
domain, so what it might look like.
Yes.
Because I don't think an estimate of 150 million is really.
But let's say it was 15 million rather than 150. Would you accept that as, you know, is that what you'd be asking us to consider? Something that with a cost of £15 million?
Well, at least we'd know what it was. that's the question.
Right, have we had the text yet? Or,
sorry, I need to.
Okay. So what would officers like to comment at this point, given that you've not seen the text?
Officers have seen. I just also put point of order that there is a precedent for this, because there was an amendment at the TRC committee that went completely against officers' recommendations and was not seen by all the members of the committee before that meeting, and that amendment was taken and passed. So, yeah, we need to have some sort of
Thank you. I believe we did circulate a proposed response that Robert Parkin and Legal is going to send back. Has that not been sent yet, Councillor Diamond?
Yeah, it has.
Well, it has. Because we proposed a counter proposal in terms of wording. I think we said best endeavours rather than a specific agreement to cessation in 2025. Obviously, we've got a number of street cleansing trials, etc., happening, which will be, we hope, beneficial in reducing the amount of pesticides. But it's quite hard without those trials having been undertaken to commit to a specific number in terms of reduction quantity.
Right, but I've not seen this. If people are working on, and Mark's not seen it, I don't think, I'm not happy, to be honest, making a proposal that basically we haven't seen. I'm happy that we ask for basically your proposal, Lexi, to be put on the work programme to come back in 6 months.
Yeah.
And for us to agree the recommendation in front of us as they're written in the report. So that's what I would suggest at this point. Would that be acceptable?
And just to make sure that it is reflected in the minutes appropriately, because sometimes we'll say that we don't have a verbatim minute in, although it's recorded. So something to make sure it's reflected in the minutes for the next thing, so we know that it will be coming back and it will be discussed in a serious and extended manner.
Yeah. Okay. Are we all happy with that? Was that agreed? So proposals in front of us are agreed as written, and the Alexi's proposal, which has been described and has been circulated to some officers, is effectively made an item on the work programme, again with the objective of 6 months from now for a report to come back. Okay. Are we all agreed to that? I'll take silence as assent to the meeting. Excellent. Oh, no.
Sorry, can we just give it a particular committee to come back to, because 6 months I'm not quite sure. Can we say February meeting?
If you like, yes. I mean the work programme is never a guarantee that something happens time anyway, but yes.
Can I just check? That it's modified to just be an amendment to the work programme.
I've circulated now. I mean, if you want to quickly read it and vote on it.
Well, okay. If you'd like us to vote on it, we can. I think we will vote it down if that's what you want us to do, just for the as a request on process. Can't predict the view of members, but I'm inclined to vote that down and then to put it on the work programme as we agreed. Is that okay? So, shall I put it to the vote? I mean, I don't know if members, I can see it now. Members, are you happy to vote on it, or do you still need to read it? Go and read it.
As we've had complaints about officers bringing reports at the last minute, I can't see that we can then submit some at the last minute. And I know you've been working on it, I get that, I understand that. So it would have been helpful if we'd had these conversations in an open and transparent manner. We're trying to encourage cross-party working, and this isn't the best way to do it, I don't think. So I'm sympathetic to what you're saying, and we will take it forward. But at this stage, because I've not had a chance to consider it and see the counter-legal advice, I'm reluctant to support it at this stage. Not that I'm opposed to it, but not just as the process. I'm uncomfortable with the way that you're ambushing us. Okay, will be the allegation.
Yes, I mean, I've got to say I would second that. We have had 2 pre-meetings to this meeting where amendments people wish to bring could be discussed, so that groups would have time to form a view on them, and that's not happened in this case. I don't want to particularly open this. Go on, Lexi.
Okay, in that case, I'm happy to withdraw for it to go on the work plan.
Okay.
But I'd just like to make for a point of order that in the previous committee meeting, not our committee, TRC, that was exactly what happened, an ambush, and it was voted on without the other members of the committee seeing it. So we need to review the process of the committee for amendments. Thank you.
Your protest is noted. Okay, so the amendment is withdrawn. The recommendations are in the report, are they agreed? I'll take silence as a sense. Thank you. And the decision to add the content of the amendment to the work programme is that's noted as well. And that's agreed as well. I'll take silence as assent on that. Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is, let's go back to the agenda, the civil parking and bus lane enforcement policy. Ben and Sabia, do you want to come and introduce this?
Just to introduce myself, Ben Brailsford, Head of Street Scene Services.
Good afternoon, I'm Sabia Hanif, Parking Services Manager.
Just before we go any further with this session, we just want to draw committee members to the fact that there's a slight amendment in the policy that's been published that we're asking you to consider today, just for clarity. So we've got a hard copy that we're going to share with you now, but just be really clear, it's just about a point of clarity about the dropped curb enforcement, and just being really clear that we're not seeking white H markings to be in place in order to do that, but I'll share a copy now.
Okay, I'll start while Ben's circulating those copies. So the report seeks approval of an updated civil parking and bus lane enforcement policy. The policy provides updated information and guidance on national regulation and government guidance, how enforcement is carried out for parking and bus lane contraventions, serves objectives for enforcement, and the appeals process that motorists must follow to dispute the parking or bus lane ticket, and a guide to our cancellation policies. This is aimed at ensuring our policies reflect national regulations and guidance, are transparent and are consistent. Just to give you a bit of background, last time parking enforcement policy was published in 2012. Since then, we have made some revisions to the policy since then, and also we published the appeals policy in 2019 that was also published. Changes have been made when required, when needed, and the last one that was added was the 2020 persistent evaders and the parking removals Appendix B with the pack. Full policy has been revised, and there's been quite a lot of extensive work being carried out in the last 12 months with this policy, which also includes new powers that have been introduced under the Traffic Management Act 2004, Also, other changes such as the new Civil Enforcement Regulations 2022, revised traffic signs regulations and general directions 2016, and updated traffic signs manuals and highway code. And the reason why enforcement policy is quite important is that because it outlines who can and cannot park in the restricted areas and when they may do so. The penalty charge notices are issued by our civil enforcement officers that are on street, and also ANPR reviewers that also do the bus lane enforcement. And they are employed by the council. All appeals in relation to the issue of the penalty charge notice are dealt with by the council's processing team in the Place Hub. This promotes greater consistency in the approach taken to enforcing the traffic regulations and how challenges, representations, appeals and residual dispensations are dealt with, and how the council will endeavour to treat people fairly, equally and with respect. Just to move on to the proposal, I'll just touch on the main highlights. So 1.3 lists where we've already got the powers and that we want to include in this parking enforcement policy. And that also includes the parking in front of the drop curbs and double parking. The enforcement team currently have to refer to drivers to the police for such issues, and this would enable us to be more responsive to such complaints. Also, enforcement against heavy commercial vehicles wholly or partly parked on the footway, verge, or land between the two carriageways. Enforcement of the 24/7 loading bans that are shown by road markings but do not have signs. This is permitted by the Traffic Signs Regulations and General Directions 2016 and mentioned in Chapter 3 of the Department for Traffic Signs Manual at some locations, such as outside entrances and egresses. The provision of a sign is not always practical, but the area needs to be kept clear of parked vehicles. Enforcement against vehicles parked in correctly signed cycle tracks, and CCTV parking enforcement for parking to include no waiting, no loading restrictions in mandatory cycle lanes and in bus lanes. Also, just to move on to 1.5, civil enforcement regulations were amended in 2022, and this is reflected in the updated policy. Key changes included timescale for the bus lane PCN, discounted payments, 21 days instead of 14 days, the introduction of fixed time for local authorities to respond to bus lane representations, and changes to the way motorists can oppose a bus lane PCN debt registration. While we've been reviewing the regulations and everything else, we thought it was a good opportunity to also look at how we can actually make some effectiveness and efficiencies as well within our current parking policy. So we've also outlined under the 1.6 is reducing warning notices periods, enforcement use warning notices to educate drivers, when new restrictions are introduced to alert them that they may be issued a PCN in future, where they regularly park in a particular location or drive a certain route and may not have noticed the sign changes. So currently we issue warning notices for any sort of new schemes like on-street parking. So if you've got any new car parks or anything like that, we issue a 2 weeks notice in our current policy, and what we are proposing is to drop that down to 1 week. Also, reduce the observation periods in our car parks as well. We're historically given 5 minutes observation as being allowed, but this would normally be due to check for activities such as loading, but loading exemptions don't really apply in car parks, so there's not really point having that point included in our policy. Also, to reduce observation periods in most circumstances on street where loading is allowed to 3 minutes, this would include removing a 10-minute observation period previously allowed for transits and other larger vehicles where loading is permitted. Operators of commercial vehicles should often be able to provide evidence to support appeals if they were engaged in such activity. And further on down the proposal, we also done quite a lot of work with the traffic regulation orders that we've already got in place, and we've also reviewed all the exemptions across the Sheffield City. So that was included part of the work that was carried out. And then also with the signage as well, that was also reviewed part of the policy review work. And just to move on, in terms of the consultation, we also did a consultation early this year in March for the drop girls parking. We also engaged with the disability access group as well. So we've taken that feedback on board as well. And the rest of the traffic regulation orders that were put in place, there is always a consultation. So there tends to be quite a lot of engagement work carried out before the restrictions are place when they come into parking services. So all that work does get done, and even though we've got a parking enforcement policy, we try to educate drivers where we can. We do quite a lot of engagement work with the schools, where officers do spend that time. They go to schools and do quite a lot of engagement work as well, and also we work with our local communities, especially like the religious establishments as well. We do quite a lot of engagement and education sessions as well with those organisations. And all the implications were taken into consideration, part of this report, and I hope members welcome the changes that we're proposing and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Can I propose we agree a further 30-minute extension to the meeting in order to have a discussion on this item? Is that agreed?
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you. I'm just going to speak first in that I'm not happy with two of the proposals in here, and I'm going to propose an amendment to remove them. And I'll explain why, and then I'll open it up to discussion. I don't expect there's any dispute over everything else in the paper, but obviously members may say otherwise. So the first one, 1.6 bullet point number 1, the reduced warning notice periods, I do think is a mistake, specifically in relation to things like bus gates, because and we saw the kickback over the Arundel Gate bus gate, people getting caught out quite accidentally, and just to turn around and say, well, the problem is that we've given too much warning, we need to give less warning, I think is tone deaf, is not understanding you know, the genuine mistakes that have happened there. So I would suggest we don't reduce the notice warning period with regard to that. And it is worth. I mean, yes, most notices go out within a month. You didn't say that they all go out within a month. Of course, if one takes longer than a month to go out, it's not a warning, is it? It's too late, because they'll get it after they've incurred an actual PCN. So I would suggest that we don't accept the proposal in 1.6 bullet point number 1. The second one, in 1.6 bullet point number 3, the observation period for issuing PCNs on the streets and elsewhere. I'm happy with that for cars going down to 3 minutes. I do think an exception needs to stay in place for vans, because a van engaged in unloading is, it will often have to deal with paperwork and stuff like that. It involves a process very often that takes a little bit longer. And though you say in most cases they'll be able to appeal if they're engaged in loading and unloading. Well, in most cases, again, it isn't really good enough. I mean, I don't want to be catching people with tickets that they shouldn't be getting. And so I would propose therefore my second proposal is that the reduction from 10 minutes to 3 minutes for vans is removed. I think politically it's worth saying that we've already hit vans once, haven't we, in this city? That vans, in terms of being charged in the CAS, when cars aren't, are taking a larger share of the burden of reducing air quality than private cars, as are taxis. And so picking on them again would say, I think politically is again the wrong thing to do. It is a little bit tone deaf. So those are the two changes I am proposing. I'll open it up now. So I've got Alexi and then Tim.
Can I just have a point of order on those two proposals? Because the first one is a point of clarification, really. The first one, I think in the report it already said that if there was a good reason that the warning notice would be extended, if they said, they were, for example, they were away for that period and they received it, then they would have a bit of extra time. So I don't think it really applies. And then the second one, I think the observation period, if they are loading, then if they are there for the 10 minutes, they'll be observed within that 10 minute that you should observe them.
I think they're points against Alexi rather than points of information. I think the observation period, to be clear, there are two. On the first point, there are two warning periods. There's one is for that on the street where notice is attached to the vehicle, and that is proposed to go down from 2 weeks to 1 week. My point's generally related to the other one, which is going down from 2 months to 1 month for things like bus lanes that involve a notice through the post rather than something attached to the vehicle. And obviously there's a logic to that being a longer period of time. But by all means, you can argue to separate them if you like. I haven't separated the two issues; they are separate. Tim, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I'll second your proposal, Joe. I think that's very sensible. Also, the 1 month to 2 month proposal come to S10 if you think your post can arrive in that amount of time. The other thing is about foreign vehicles. You mentioned on maybe issue. We don't have an access. We've lost much of pains me as you know, to repeat Joe's phrase. We don't have access to the European databases anymore. So unless we're going to clamp the foreign vehicles that are illegal or tow them away, there's little likelihood that they will pay.
Do you want to respond to that point, and I'll come to Mark?
Yeah, we don't do it at the moment anyway.
Yeah, it's actually not lack of being in the European Union that means we haven't got access to those databases. There is the potential for us to review a contract with international enforcement. That's not something that we're looking at this particular point. But what we can do with foreign vehicles is, if we have had a number of PCNs issued alongside the policy for persistent evaders, is if they continually persistently evade, paying the enforcement notices, we've still got the powers to remove that and take that down to a compound where they would have to come and show proof of who they are, where they live, and then we can kind of follow up on some of that. But that's unlikely. It's not a massive issue that we've got in Sheffield.
Mark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ben and Sabia, for bringing this. It's mostly really welcome. I've got some concerns and reservations about some of it. Particularly for me, one thing I'd like to get a clarification from officers is with regards to parking in loading bays. Though I understand where you're coming from and see where you want to get to, my concern isn't about what you're actually putting in here, it's actually in terms of officer safety. So I know that our parking enforcement officers will have body-worn cameras on them. My contention, rightly or wrongly, would be that those parking in these loading bays who are abusing the system, car drivers and such like, don't have any regard for the law, they don't care. And I'm worried that we're putting our parking officers in an environment where they'll be confronted with possible criminal elements that won't like the fact that they've got a parking ticket for being in that parking bay, which they shouldn't have done. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't enforce, because we should. But I'm just making sure, are we sure that our parking wardens are robustly protected, and are we making sure that we're looking at what they're doing and how they're working to keep them nice and safe? They will have the cameras. They will have cameras on. I know that does de-escalate, but I want to make sure that we are, and all our officers are aware of the risks involved in there. There are things about the fixed penalty notices that we would like to get clarity on. Like, have we got a programme to ensure that the appeal time is being dealt with, that the number of appeals will come down and such like? And do we feel we've got capacity to take everything forward as it is? Which is a given. But one thing specifically I'd like to talk about is on 4.3.5. Sorry, Joe, I'll try and do this nice and briefly. All of us have probably had a lot of complaints about people parking across their driveways and such like for a long period, and we knew that the police could enforce where there was a car parked in the driveway but not when it was being blocked out of it. We can see here from the legislation that this dates back to 2004. So for me as a ward councillor, if I'd have been armed with this information a lot earlier, it would make it a lot easier to, certainly around, as you said, Sabia, the religious environments where people are going to services. There's particular issues around Ramadan and such like, where people are going to pray regularly and they're taking the cars because getting to 5 prayer sessions is such like. So is there anything we're missing? Is there anything we should be bringing forward that we've not brought forward? Because this stuff from 2004, that would have helped me when I was a new councillor in terms of addressing it and having those conversations with those religious organisations. So is there anything else that we should be bringing forward that we haven't brought forward yet?
I'll address the first point in terms of the civil enforcement officers putting them at a risk. They have got body cams, every new locations where we do risk assessments. And the feedback that we get from our civil enforcement officers is that the shortest time that it can be at the site is better for them. So when we're saying that reducing the observation times, even for 3 minutes, is better for them to do everything within 3 minutes, issue a PCN and leave and move on, rather than staying there longer. And they get enough training as well. We do train all our officers, and we do invest highly in training as well, and that has improved over the years. So anything that we are proposing part of this report, we've done quite a lot of engagement work with our teams as well, and this is a feedback that we also included in our policy, as well as working with our stakeholders as well. And the point in terms of why it hasn't been brought forward when we've had these powers for a number of years, it's just that we're quite, in terms of the resource and everything else, putting everything through, it takes time. I don't know if there is anything else.
I think might know that I don't think there's anything else that we think's available at the moment that we're not bringing forward in this report. We think these are the things that we've been missing as a city to improve our enforcement operation over the last number of years. Sometimes when the legislation is first laid, there's a bit about learning how things work and don't work. So actually, I think some of these options have been trialled in the past, found not to work, been rolled back until people are more used to them. We've now learned from other cities of how they've done, so we're bringing them forward now. So it's not a case we've been sat on our hands not bringing anything forward. We've been learning how things we're going to bring forward, and this will help us deliver our enforcement activity better. But ultimately, to answer your question, no, we don't think there's anything else missing that needs to be brought forward at this point. This is bringing us up to date with all our options.
Actually, sorry, Joe, for coming in there. You said something there about others have brought forward stuff and then rolled back when they found they've been difficult to implement. So actually, it not actually occurred to me, but whatever we're bringing here today, if we find in, say, 2-3 months it's impractical or not working for us, we could potentially look at revisiting these decisions and change our mind if needed.
I think from the policy work here today, we'll then take that forward operation and we'll plan that effectively. We'll talk to you about what that looks like, but always we'll look to learn from that so we can, if we need to, also revisit policy in time. It's not great to be revisiting policy that regularly, but we would look to kind of keep you updated in terms of the progress and the success or the challenges that we're facing as we're doing the knowledge briefings going forward. To give you an example about where people have had challenges before bringing some of this forward, we've been around drop curbs in the past. There was some directions in London where adjudicators in London thought signs were required. After a number of kind of challenges and a number of kind of things going through the court, they then accepted that signs weren't required and enforcement was come through. So that's just an example of where sometimes it needs to go through the kind of traffic penalty tribunal process. Local authorities need to learn from that, and we're obviously benefiting from that now, knowing how to implement that, seeing where other people have been successful.
Thank you. So, I've got Sue and Lexi. I'm going to draw a line under kind of questions then. If final comments on the amendment, if they're wanted, and then we'll make a decision on that. So,
okay, so this is part question, part comment, but both very short. So on point 3.1, I'm just a bit confused by the bullet point that says only 77% experience problems with vehicles double parking. I mean, 77% sounds quite a big number to me. So I'm hoping or assuming that I don't know which bit's wrong, but it doesn't look right. When we ask people about double parking, a lot of people misunderstand what is technically meant by double parking. I just wondered whether that was explained as part of the survey. It's not important, but I just raise it. And my comment is really just going back to Councillor Otton's proposal, which is really just to say, if my image of somebody delivering to a small shop, I live very near small shops, as people may know, is that vans often park outside, ready to deliver something. They then have to queue up behind the customer who's having their pork sandwich made or whatever, because there's only 1 or 2 people in the shop. That's easily going to take them over 3 minutes before they come back out. So I just fear that people are going to be submitting loads and loads of appeals, and I don't think that's a sensible way forward.
To answer, respond to that.
I mean, again, I think just a report sets out that we've done some analysis in terms of when people have had enforcement for loading, on what period of time that person has been observed in terms of loading. So I think what's the time in there, Sandra? Is it 3 minutes?
3 minutes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So in general, the majority of activity around loading has been observed within the first 3 minutes. So what percentage of that was it?
The 66.
Yeah, so you kind of sort of two-thirds of all loading activity is observed in the first 3 minutes, which is why we're proposing that.
Yeah, the figures in the report relate to all vehicles, I guess, don't they? And we're only proposing an amendment with regard to vans.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the point is that vans are different to cars. Okay. Sue also asked a question about the 77% figure in 3.1, which is a bit baffling.
Yeah, I think that was just an error. 77% is correct. Not only that is quite a bit percentage that have experienced double parking.
Probably meant to say over then, really.
Yeah.
That's fine, that's fine. I just wanted to check which way round it was.
Okay, Alexei.
Thank you very much, Chair. And before you introduce the amendment, which I think was a bit out of order, we should have discussed the actual report first of all. So I just really want to thank you for bringing the report. I think there's some really welcome things in there that will help to improve accessibility in Sheffield, especially things around drop curb parking and cycle lanes and bus lanes, and also make civil enforcement much more efficient. So it could be two-fifths more efficient if these measures are accepted. But I'd also like to say that it is a big challenge in Sheffield. There are parts of Sheffield that there isn't adequate parking enforcement because it's not well enough resourced, and CEOs aren't empowered to do their job effectively. So we have some areas of the city, such as Attercliffe, where there are double yellow lines, but there's loads of pavement parking. It doesn't seem to be able to be enforced currently. So anything that we can do to improve that is good. In terms of obstructive parking as well, members will be aware that we have the most dangerous roads for children of any core city. And also very dangerous roads for cyclists. And a big reason for this is because of obstructive parking and illegal parking, which can't be enforced properly because of long observation times and making CEOs work really hard and inefficient to do. So again, I welcome this. I mean, we've got things like in my LAC, for example, Lib Dem councillors requesting extra parking enforcement in wood seats, and parking services saying, sorry, we just don't have the resource to do that. And I think one of the reasons for that is because of how much time they do spend observing vehicles. So yeah, I think I would argue against anything to water down that, and that, in fact, I would really like to see it go further. I think there's not really an excuse for obstructive parking. I think in the vast majority of circumstances, even van drivers could park somewhere where it's actually legal to park if they were going to envisage queuing up somewhere, so I don't really think that's an excuse. And as the report says, if they are actually genuinely unloading or loading, then there'll be evidence of that within the first 3 minutes. So I'll just add a couple of questions as well for the officers. The first one was around observation times for city centre pavement parking. I just wonder if there was any observation time that applies there or not. And then another question around the online reporting tool that was due to come in July for members of the public. Is that out now, and if so, could that be circulated so we have it? Or if not, when will it be? And then I noticed something on page 214 of the manual. Sorry, so if everyone could go to page 214, there's two entries for, I think it was number 34. And one entry simply states that people can appeal a PCN only giving the reason that only stopped for a few minutes without having to submit any evidence. So I think that might be a mistake, or somebody dropping something in there. I don't know. There's two entries for number 34 on page 214, and I don't think saying I only stopped for a few minutes is an acceptable reason anyway.
Do you want to answer those?
Sorry, there's one last question.
Fourth question.
It is on the amendment. I just wanted to have officers' opinion on the amendment before we go to the vote. Thanks.
Okay, just going back with the web tool reporting. I've got confirmation. Don't me hold to it, but it should be released next Friday. So I will share the details with you. So I have been pushing for it. Apologies, it's just summertime. There was a lot of leave, but we are trying to push that forward because that will help out my team as well. So that hopefully should be out next Friday. Just going back with the pavement parking, that is an instant PCN. So there isn't any observation time for the city centre. So that's confirmed. And sorry, what was the final point? Oh yeah, and there is an error in terms of the numbers. So the information is not incorrect. What it should say is that we would accept evidence. So when we were talking about the van drivers, where they have to provide evidence, like delivery notes, they would have to provide evidence. So it is a separate entry. I think there was just an error in the number for that. So yeah, they have to submit evidence. It won't be without the evidence for even parking there for a few minutes when they've been issued a PCM.
Could that be made explicit in the report that they do have to, in the code manual, that they do have to provide evidence?
Yeah,
it looks like they don't have to provide
Yeah,
evidence.
I think one of the appeals guidance is in there as well, but we'll double check. But yeah, they are supposed to provide evidence. We don't normally would accept anything in appeals if people don't provide evidence anyway.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to the amendment. Does anyone want to make a comment on the amendment before we vote on it?
I'm just wondering why we're having an amendment when we didn't have Alexi's amendment, and what the rule is around amendments as a whole. And perhaps it's actually something that Councillor Sue Alston and I might take up at the Governance Committee.
By all means.
Just to pick up the legal question on that, there are no specific rules in the Constitution regarding amendments to officer papers at committees. So but it all comes down to whether or not members are prepared to vote for a specific amendment on the day. Obviously, the previous paper, Councillor Diamond proposed an amendment. The indication from members was that they were uncomfortable with voting on that, and Councillor Diamond agreed to withdraw it. The same can happen for Councillor Otton's amendment, or you can agree to vote for it. There are no specific constitutional rules around it.
Thank you for that. I would add that I did raise these points at pre-meeting, so this is not something that members have been ambushed with. If there are no comments, I propose to move to the vote on my amendment. Just to restate it for absolute clarity, it's to remove 1.6. I'll restate it and then I'll come to you, Alexi. Remove 1.6 bullet point 1, the recommendation in there on notice periods, and in 1.6 bullet point 3, to keep the 10-minute observation period for vans and other vehicles that have 10 minutes, but it's not to remove the change to 3 minutes for other vehicles. So we're happy with the change to 3 minutes. So I hope that's completely clear. Alexi?
Firstly, can I propose that we take each one separately?
If you like.
And then secondly, can we have an opinion from the officers on both of those suggested amendments?
Yeah, so you just want to look at so just to be clear, Councillor Orton, which one was on 1.6, removing the first bullet point altogether? So
first bullet point altogether.
That would leave us continuing our current process of issuing 2 weeks worth of warning notices for parking, new parking restrictions coming into effect, and 2 months worth of warning notices for bus lanes. So that will leave us with that. If we take that bullet point out of there.
Sorry, can I just ask you, you've explained about the bus lane for not reducing that down to 2 months. What was the thoughts behind the 2 weeks to 1 week for on-street parking?
Well, principally not to overcomplicate the amendment, but I think the principle is also there that the point of this isn't to catch people out, is it? It's to give people a fair notice, and so I think the simplest, most consistent way was to reject the whole bullet point.
Right, okay.
So I think, if you're right, Sabby, in terms of the bullet point, I think what the amendment would do is it could potentially increase the amount of time that somebody would be prepared to park illegally waiting for the new enforcement to come in. By reducing it, we reduce the potential of illegal parking taking place for that period of time. But yes, it could mean that some people who were away on leave would have to come back and appeal a PCN rather than just take note of the warning notice on the window, so they might have to take further action. And on the bus lane one, I think the statistics in the report indicate that most of the people that are going to receive a warning period in that first month are going to be people that are the ones that are passing there locally, so there's no particular additional benefit by adding an additional month onto that. So again, we could be adversely affecting an additional amount of people, but people would have that option to appeal if they had been away and missed that kind of warning period. So I think officer's opinion is just really restating what's in the report in terms of there are pros and cons for both.
Thank you. So, has been
Sorry, Chair, just to clarify, that obviously the report supports the policy, but the recommendation is to adopt the policy that was attached to the report, subject to the amendment that the officers have asked you to consider, which relates to the main part of the report to do with parking. It's about drop curbs. So when you would say reject bullet point 1 to 1.6, what that would actually do is amend the policy attached to the report to take out the changes described in what bullet 1 of 1.6 and bullet 3 of 1.6. I appreciate that's effectively the same thing, but it's just to be clear for members of the public that we're changing the bits of the policy that relate to those things, not changing the report.
Thank you for that. No, you're quite right. I appreciate that. It is. I mean, I thought it was simpler to discuss it in using the report, but the effect I'm seeking is exactly what you have said. With Alexa's request, I'm going to vote on this in two parts. Then, so can I see those in favour of the rejection of the policy in bullet point 1 of 1.6 to reduce the policy is to reduce the notice periods. So the amendment is to reject bullet point 1 of 1.6. Can I see those in favour of that? And against? And that's everybody. So that's lost. I'd like my vote in favour recorded of that, please. I don't know if Tim or Sue, whether you want your votes recorded on that. That's a no. I don't know. I didn't get that. Okay. And so on bullet point 3, again, the amendment is only affecting the vehicles that have 10-minute observation periods. So it's to keep the 10-minute observation period, but not to change the proposal in relation to cars in 3 minutes. So can I see all those in favour of that amendment? And against? And that's everybody, so that falls. Again, can I have my vote recorded on that, please? And yeah, I think that's Sue as well. Tim, do you want your votes recorded? Yes, good. Thank you. With that amendment resolved, can we agree the recommendations with the alteration regarding H markings that was made earlier? Is that agreed? I'll take silence as a sense. Okay, that's agreed. Thank you very much. Final item, we have very few minutes. We have the Christmas parking offer. I don't know, I think we know what the proposals are, but so don't spend very long, but if you want to very briefly introduce that, I would like to finish this in 5 minutes, if we can.
Okay, so this purpose of the report is to propose to set out at the request of the Chair and the Deputy Chair of the Committee options to consideration in terms of parking concessions in the city centre, seeking to increase footfall to support the Christmas retail and hospitality offer. The background to this being that the council and its partners develop a programme of Christmas activity each year in the city centre, which is designed to encourage people to visit hospitality and retail at a crucial trading period for these businesses. The programme encompasses a wide variety of festive activities supported by the council that take place from mid-November through to the end of December. Plans are still being developed, but last year saw a number of activities, including the largest Christmas market to date, running from Pinston Street through to the Peace Gardens and down the moor, additional Christmas lights, family activities such as Santa's Grotto and an elf trail, and seasonal musical performances and light shows on the cathedral. The pantomimes also attract thousands of people each year, being held at the Sheffield Theatres and City Hall. So these activities do make a positive difference to footfall in the city centre at this time of year. Footfall in the city centre continues to increase and has improved year on year, which is highlighted in the table in the report. However, year to date it is still 8% lower than seen in 2019 before the COVID-19 pandemic. The council in the past has agreed to some form of free parking offer at Christmas in the pay and display parking spaces the council controls in order to support the wider festive offer. The last time a parking offer was made in Sheffield was in December 2020 during the recovery from the COVID pandemic. A Christmas parking offer was not part of the budget proposals agreed when setting the 23-24 budget. Previous offers in 2019 have been free Sunday parking from when the Christmas lights turned on in mid-November through to the last Sunday before Christmas Day. However, in 2020, a different offer was proposed, which was affected by the national lockdown, which didn't come off until the 2nd of December. So 3 weekends throughout the whole city were offered in 2020. Sheffield's High Street Forum has asked a question about whether a Christmas parking offer would be implemented in 2023. So clearly this report is able to set out a couple of proposals to be considered. Option 1 being around free all-day parking in the city centre on Sundays between the 19th and 24th of December. Sundays have got a lower footfall in the city centre compared to the rest of the week, so provide the most potential benefit from any Christmas promotional activity. And the cost of the council of offering Sunday free parking is less than the rest of the week due to the pricing structure. In the report, it's highlighted that if that offer was taken up, it would cost in the region of £37,000 plus some additional costs actually putting that in place of £4,000. The second proposal, or second option then, sorry, for members to consider, is offering free all-day parking on Saturdays and Sundays across all council pay and display bays throughout the city, not just the city centre, between the 2nd and 3rd of December and the 16th and 17th of December. That would cost more in the region of £84,000 in lost income, plus the £4,000 additional costs. There's a third option, which is obviously to do with nothing. The council can choose to maintain its current tariffs throughout the festive period. Other considerations just to bear in mind when looking at these options are any decisions to provide free parking will only apply to the council's pay and display parking, not other private operators, and the council only manages approximately 18% of all available parking in the city centre. The council does have a duty to consider traffic management impacts under the road traffic regulations, and December is already one of our busiest months, with most council managed car park spaces being taken up at peak period.
Ben, you nearly done. I just said 5 minutes. I meant 5 minutes for all of us, not just not just for yourself. Are we nearly done? I've got hands up as well. We'll struggle to the time to take all of these. Are you nearly done?
I think I just wanted to put on record some of the points in the report that are around some of the impacts on finance as well as footfall.
Yeah, I think we've all read the report. I just want to simplify this because we've got 3 options before us. I suspect nobody is going to argue for option 2. Is that correct? The weekend thing. So can we just eliminate that from consideration? Regarding option 1, actually, what I would like to suggest is it's December's only. So it's 4 weekends in December, 4 Sundays in December. So it would be a cheaper version of option 1. Is anybody going to want to argue for the full option 1? Is that a yes, Johnny? Don't put your hand up unless it's a yes. No, it's a no. Okay. So that in that case, we've narrowed it down to 2 options, which is option 1 with December only, and option 3. Those are the 2 options before us. So given those are the options, and given that we have very few minutes left, I will take arguments in favour of either of those. I think that's all I think we need. Christine.
I have kind of 2 questions. They're not arguments for or against. Do we have any evidence that this free parking increases footfall in the city centre? Won't people come Christmas shopping anyway, regardless of the cost? And 2, if the mayor decides to improve public transport, this is countering the argument that we want to reduce car journeys in the city and increase public transport. and we'll be losing money.
Thank you for your arguments. Mark.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Ben and Sabia, for bringing this. We've had a really busy agenda, and it's a shame we can't get to discuss this in a fuller manner. And I know it was brought almost the 11th hour because of just technical issues on this. So thank you for your work. I'm not entirely sure how we'll do the process of this. Obviously, the alternate proposal isn't what's in there, and maybe with a bit more consideration, if we'd had more time to review this, we could have structured it better. So at the moment, we would be inclined to vote for option 1.2.12, which is to do nothing, option 3. But thank you for all the work put in. And actually, going forward, maybe we should look at how we manage our agendas and such like to make sure we can get to deal with things in a timely and appropriate manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Sinead?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit surprised that you're even proposing the 4-week option. You've just put forward a fairly self-congratulatory motion to next week's full council about your role in managing the council's finances and the need for responsible budget management. So do you think it's responsible and prudent to make a spending commitment around this when there is no budget allocated and when we know that we have to make enormous savings this year?
Thank you. I think the answer's in the paper. Alexi.
So actually, as I haven't finished, Joe, I'd like an answer to that as to whether you think it is financially prudent and why you are proposing that we would spend that money, because that is what you have actually said.
Yes, and I do. Alexi.
So you think it's prudent?
Alexi.
I am asking,
You
are you
finished
it
and
is
answered the question, and
you believe
there
it
is
is
about
prudent
1 minute left for
to
this
spend
discussion.
money that we do not have and have not budgeted for on this item?
I believe the proposals in this paper are prudent, yes, and they are.
Can I have
the financial
minuted
descriptions
that, please,
are
that
in the paper.
Chair has said
We would
he
not
believes it is prudent to spend money that has not been budgeted for in any way. Thank you.
I suggest you read the paper, Sinead. Alexi, and we have about a minute left, and then we're going to move to a vote.
Okay. Thank you very much for reading the report. I think the report's quite clear that this fails on its own terms. It's unlikely to bring anyone new to the city centre. The results are likely to be people just driving around looking for a pre-parking space. I think what is missing in the equality impact assessment is the impact on people that aren't car drivers, and particularly the effect on the clean air. We've had a clean air zone, and we're just saying we don't actually want a clean air zone. We don't value clean air. I think there hasn't really been any consultation, because it's not just businesses that need to be consulted, but also the other people that use the city centre, the people who use public transport, people who have asthma, people who might be impacted by loads of cars just driving around the city centre. I think the optics on this is absolutely awful in a climate emergency. I agree with Sinead that it's not given our budget.
We're now out of time for discussion, so I'm going to move to the vote on the options and then on the recommendations. So can I see those in favour of option 1 for Sunday's version, please? Thank you. And votes in favour of option 3? Okay. Yes, I think everybody wants their votes recorded on that one. And with that proviso, the only effective recommendation left is noting the public transport ask from Transport. Can we take those remaining recommendations as agreed?
No.
No. Well, so to be clear, the recommendation, we've considered the options and we've had a vote on the options. The other recommendation is to note that TRC may authorise officers to liaise with SYMCA to identify potential measures to promote and or incentivise the use of public transport over the Christmas period, and further recommend that it does so.
No, I would argue against that as well, because we don't know whether there is any finance, we don't know if there's time, and we can't actually ask another committee to expend money that it hasn't already budgeted for.
Well, okay, so we don't have time to discuss this. we simply need to vote on the recommendations that of the report to accept or reject the report. Clearly, all that's left is an ask for a public transport offer in the Christmas period. So can I see those in favour of the recommendations of the report, please? And those against? Thank you. And that is the final item of business. Thank you all for I would say staying up late. It feels late, but it's actually lunchtime.